Go on and start. All right. Call to order the Chaska City Planning Commission, Wednesday, October 9th, 2024. Liz, can you make a roll?
Commissioner Austin,
Here.
Aswa,
Here.
Campbell,
Here.
Gory,
Here.
Kerber,
Here.
Olson,
Here.
Purdy,
Here.
Urbanski, and Chairperson Brass.
Here. With that, we'll move into adopt the agenda. Can I get a motion to adopt the agenda? Second. Austin, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. Visitor presentation is next on the agenda. There's a lot of people here tonight, so the visitor presentation will be anyone who would like to speak to the commission on any matter that's not on the agenda. So if you're on the agenda, you'll have your time at the appropriate spot. Is there anyone on Zoom? We're good? Okay, with that, we'll move on to approve the previous meeting minutes. September 11th, 2024 Planning Commission meeting minutes. Someone like to make a motion?
Make a motion to approve the previous amendment.
Olson,
Second.
Kerber, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. And consent items. So we have to recommend approval of the final site and building plan for the Golf Performance Center at Hazeltine. PC 2024-18. We've seen this a few times. Does anyone have any final questions for city or staff? Okay, with that then, this would be the final site and building plan. So I'll make a motion to recommend approval of the final site and building plan.
Second.
Second by Purdy. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Action item 7. And approval of the preliminary site and preliminary plat, zoning ordinance amendment, and conditional use permit for the CloudHQ development. Liz?
Just one moment, please. Just making sure you guys see it on your side as well. Okay. Thank you. All right, so we have a preliminary site and building plan, preliminary plat, zoning ordinance amendment, and conditional use permit request this evening for the project known as CloudHQ, which is also being proposed by the same entity. So the site in question is highlighted on this aerial showing on the screen here in orange. It's a 72-acre site that's located north of Engler Boulevard, north of the local street known as West Creek Lane. Clover Ridge abuts the east and north sides of the property. There is a city-owned substation that's southwest of the property, and then additional rural and rural residential areas to the west of the property. Also off of West Creek Lane contains 3 other data centers. So this would be the final site to complete out what is known as West Creek Corporate Center. Here's just a more simplified aerial view of the property if we need to go back to it for any reason. But getting into the process side of things and where we're at. So as most of you are aware, but for those that are new to the city's process, it requires a 3-step process for a majority of our land use applications. We are in the second step of the 3-step process. The concept plan, which is the first step, was completed in 2022. So we are at the second step, which is the preliminary site and building plan and rezoning and more of that technical analysis. So this is more of that detailed review and understanding of code and how the project either complies. And then if things were to move forward this evening and with City Council, the third and final step would be final site and building plan approval. So in terms of some previous approvals that have occurred on this site does date back to 2015 and 2017 when the first concept plan and preliminary plan came through for the site. And this was for a different project, different from CloudHQ, which was for four data centers. At this time, in 2017 is when the rezoning occurred on the property to Planned Industrial District number 7. And at that time is when development standards were put in place that were relevant to the project that was proposed with the four data centers. And that's also when the building height maximum was established too, was in reference to that 4 data center use. In August of 2022, I should also mention that 4 data center use did not move on to final. So that project did end up getting abandoned and was not constructed. So in August of 2022 is when we saw a different concept plan come forward specifically from the CloudHQ entity. And in August of 2022 is when that concept plan was approved. And I just want to note a couple details that were done at that 2022. At that time, it was known that the building proposed was 72 feet in height. It was 4 million square feet total in square footage. Berming was also shown as a part of that concept plan. There was anticipation for the use of mechanical equipment, including generators and cooling systems on top of the building, and the need for a new substation to help service the electric capacity for this size of building. That plan that was approved in August of 2022 is shown on this screen here. So if we need to refer back to it, we can. Also at that time, or shortly after the concept plan was approved, an AUAR was completed and adopted for the site because of the size of the data center that was proposed. It was in the threshold of requiring an environmental assessment. So an AUAR is an alternative to that or eligibility for that. So that was completed in January of 2023 when it was formally adopted. And then subsequent to that, in October of 2023, you guys saw the conditional use permit request come through for the construction of the berm on this property. So they did receive approval for that conditional use permit, and that was in anticipation that the berm was going to be starting way before the building and site plan process. They still have not started the construction of the berm, but that CUP is still a valid document on the site. And then recently in August, on August 13th, the applicant did host another neighborhood meeting with the property owners within 500 feet just to come before them again and give them notice that they were applying for their preliminary plan. In terms of existing conditions on this property, so as I mentioned before, the property is currently zoned under PID 7, or what we know as Planned Industrial District number 7. It is a roughly 72-acre site that's composed of 2 different parcels. There's a smaller parcel that contains the homestead on the property that's roughly 1.6 acres in size. And then the larger parcel is a little over 70 acres in size and has been used as agricultural land. The driveway to the homestead does come off of Schoolmaster Drive to the north here to access the property. And that comes through a city-owned outlot between the existing residences on Schoolmaster Drive. That driveway will be abandoned with this project. There also exists a significant electric easement that runs east to west through the property, and it's dashed out here in this exhibit, and we'll show other exhibits that clearly identify it as well. But it's 125 feet wide, and it's meant to contain the overhead transmission lines that bifurcate the property, as well as surrounding properties. So there are two transmission towers that currently exist on the property, and that will remain with the course of the project. And then also near to the site is a city-owned substation that's 50 megawatts in size, and that's on the southwest side of the property. So to get into the details of the request, so it's kind of a four-part request here. The first part is a preliminary site and building plan, which is for the data center site and building, which totals 1.4 million square feet in size. When you add both the stories of the building together, which amounts to 715,000 square feet of building footprint on the property. The height of the building is proposed at 72.5 feet tall, 2 stories of covered area within the building, and then a penthouse portion on top of those 2 stories. So that's where it gets to its 72.5 feet in height. A 30-foot berm is proposed on the north and east sides of the property to help screen the site from the adjacent residential areas to the north and east. Preliminary plat is the second piece of this request, and that would be to plat it into one lot for the data center use. The third part of the request is a zoning ordinance amendment to the current zoning district on the property, PID 7. And that's broken into 3 parts of amendments related to the parking provision for data centers, related to the building height defined in PID 7, and then lastly for the landscaping provision for the site. And then the last and fourth part of this request is for a conditional use permit to construct the new proposed substation totaling 200 megawatts. This is the preliminary site plan, and I've kind of colored it out just to make it a little bit more readable in terms of the different elements of the site. The building is shown in blue here, and as we mentioned before, it's 715,000 square feet of building footprint. And then when you add the 2 floors of covered space, it's 1.4 roughly million square feet of building square footage. The height of the building is 72.5 feet tall, and this is where that zoning ordinance request comes into play, since the max building height defined in PID 7 states 36 feet tall. In terms of how the site will be accessed, West Creek Lane currently stubs off as a cul-de-sac on the south side of the property. So effectively, the site will access off of that current cul-de-sac via a private driveway, which would provide full circulation around the site and building shown here. The site will be secured with with a security fence that will be a black aluminum picket style fence that will fully encompass the driving and the building areas of the site. There will be a security gate and booth at the vehicle entrance here, which is not atypical for this type of use. If you have been out to the other sites there, all of them do have security booth functions at the entrances of their sites. And that is meant to keep the site secure. These are high security uses, and that is why they have the fencing and the security booths as ancillary uses to the property. The front of the building will face north, so towards the main parking area on the northwest side of the site. And this is where most of the administrative function of the building will happen from, is the north side, but a majority of the building will be composed of the data hall and other support uses. The building is set back in a variety of different values from the property lines. So from the north property line, it's approximately 345 feet away from the nearest point there. On the south side, at its shortest point, it's roughly 165 feet away from that property line. On the east side, it's 780 feet roughly from the east property line. And then from the west property line, it's 88 feet approximately. A total of 358 parking stalls are shown in this site plan, 235 of which they would construct with the construction of the building. 123 they're showing as proof of parking. And this, based on their analysis and how many people they plan to have in the building, which is roughly 75 to 100 employees that would fit into the administration portion of the building, the parking would be able to accommodate that value. So based on the defined parking provision within PID 7 of 1 parking stall per 2,000 square feet, it requires 715 stalls. So the 358 that they're proposing does fall below that. However, the applicant is requesting an amendment to that parking provision to better align with the data center use now that we have more precedents to base a parking provision off of. The new substation is proposed on the south side of the site in purple here. And that was intentionally done to get adjacent to the existing substation, as well as provide screening and separation from adjacent residential. Berming is proposed in the green areas defined on this plan, which is a 30-foot berm, and then landscaping placed atop that 30-foot berm. Getting into the architectural details of the proposal, this slide is showing the east and west elevations of the building, and defining where that 72.5 feet part of the building really sits, which is at the top of the penthouse portion. The 2-story area goes up to 53.5 feet. So again, it ranges between 53.5 at its tallest building parapet to its tallest penthouse point at 72.5 feet. The north elevation is shown here, and it's broken up into 3 pieces because of the scale of the building here, but the top portion shows that full elongation of the building. So the north side does have most of that glazing or glass within the front portion of the building and where that administration area is for the data center. Where the front of the building would be accessed from. This is the south elevation, so facing towards the other data centers off of West Creek Lane. And then the floor plans of the proposed building. The first floor is shown here. The yellow portions are the data center hall storage areas. This gray area is an area of generators. The green area is where administration and employees would be housed. This lighter blue area is a loading area. The second floor would contain data hall storage as well as support area too. The penthouse is shown on the top portion of this floor plan, which will house both interior generators within the penthouse or pink area of this floor plan, and then a architectural screen wall with sound mitigating components to house the air cooling systems. The materials that are proposed on the building are a mix of different materials. So they will be using mainly precast concrete panels out there with 2 different colors, both in a light and a dark gray, to help provide some interest between the panels. Some portions of the panels will integrate this aluminum embedded icicle accent into the concrete to help provide another varying element into the building. And then glass and metal cladding will happen around kind of those main visual areas on the north and west sides of the building. And then in addition to the concrete and the aluminum embedded accents, they will also be incorporating vine walls to the sides of the buildings using precast concrete to help provide a soft edge to the building. So you can see how that is being utilized in these renderings here. This is the west facade, which is probably the most visible from adjacent properties. And then the north side here with the glazing system on the front. And then you can also see kind of the use of those icicle accents as well. Getting into the landscape plan, our landscape plan is based, or the quantity that's required is based on the square footage of the building. In this case, it's based on a 1.4 million square foot criteria. So that entails, from a requirement perspective, them placing over 1,500 trees on site for overstory trees, 390 understory trees or ornamental trees, and then over 2,300 shrubs on site. What's proposed is shown in this plan here. And the values are shown to the right here. So they're at 926 trees, 323 understory trees, and roughly 1,500 shrubs. So obviously it's below the city's landscape ordinance here, but there is a request to come forward with a different alternative to provide a more productive plan. So there's an amendment included as a part of this request for the landscaping provision of the site. And I'll get into that a little bit more in a separate slide. The site is also providing a 30-foot berm along the north and east sides of the site. And they provided some cross sections as well as some renderings to provide that visual detail from the adjacent sites. So the first cross section is a north to south section from the schoolmaster residences and to the building here to show the scale difference between the nearest home, the berm with the landscaping, and the proposed height at 72.5 feet tall. The next cross section is here on the east to west edge of the site between the building and the properties on Clover Meadow Drive. Oops, here. To show that separation and visual being seen from the adjacent residential. The third cross section is shown on the southeast side of the site. So here, between the building and the homes, kind of in that corner here. And this cross section was also included because this portion of the berm sits at roughly 20 feet tall versus 30 feet tall due to the existence of the XL transmission line. So it does have to step down there to be within the parameters of that easement area. And then the last one is the west edge, which is adjacent to open land on that side. And then a couple renderings. These were included during the concept plan, as well as into the preliminary here to provide that visual detail as the plantings start to become more mature at their maturing age, and what that looks like in terms of what's being seen from adjacent residences and what portions of the building can be seen from those backyards. It was noted that the planting plan incorporated into these renderings is probably half of what's shown on the landscape plan today. So the plantings here would almost double what you're seeing on these exhibits here. Getting into the substation details, so this is the portion that requires the conditional use permit. The proposed substation is a necessity for the data center in order for it to operate upon conception. So it is a 200 megawatt substation that would help feed a portion of CloudHQ's electric need. So the first phase of this substation would at least provide 50 megawatts to help accommodate the initial needs of CloudHQ's site. CloudHQ will eventually need up to 220 megawatts of electric need, which they will gain that 170 megawatts from a different substation, which is a more regional substation that would be planned at a later date. But at least for the initial start of their construction, they'll need 50 megawatts, which would come from this proposed substation on site. The additional 150 megawatts that's able to be serviced from this proposed substation would help service the needs of surrounding users. The substation itself, they've provided some details in terms of the height components of the pieces within that. The highest structure would be a monopole structure, which you can see in this image here, would be the tallest piece within the substation at 110 feet tall. And that will range in width from 3.5 feet wide at its base to 2.5 inches at its top. The other structures within the substation would fall significantly below that at 65 feet high, which would be dead-end structures to help extend the overhead lines to the adjacent transmission lines and other substation or electric structures in the vicinity. Substations do require a conditional use permit with the city, so they are asking for that as a part of their request. Essential services requires a conditional use permit, which includes substations. There's 6 criteria that are denoted in our CUP portion of our code, which have all been responded to. But to kind of summarize the proposal here, again, the substation is a needed piece for the data center to be built on the onset, but it will also help supplement surrounding users in the area, both in the business side and on the residential side too. The positioning of the substation was intentional to be placed next to the existing substation, which is the furthest spot away from nearby residential. It will also be mainly screened by the building itself that's proposed, which is 72.5 feet tall. And then it would also be screened by the 30-foot tall berm on the east side. So the pieces that are within the substation, again, would fall below what the building is proposed at in terms of height, except for the monopole structure that was mentioned. The placement of the substation was also done to be compatible with adjacent electric infrastructure in the area, such as the transmission towers and other substations that are planned or existing. And the access to the substation can be accommodated through their site that they've shown on their site plan. So the criteria listed for a conditional use permit has shown to be met. Therefore, the request for the conditional use permit is reasonable. Getting into the zoning ordinance amendments, again, these are 3 different amendment requests for the proposal. One is related to the parking provision, one is related to the building height, and then the last one is related to the landscaping provision. For the parking amendment, they are proposing to amend the language that calls out the parking regulation for data centers in the PID 7 district. The code currently states that 1 space is required for each 2,000 square feet of warehouse or data hall area. The proposal would be to amend that to be 1 space for each 4,000 square feet of data hall area. It was anticipated during the concept plan approval that there would likely be parking changes as a result of this site plan. So this is not out of line with what has already been anticipated. In terms of how we looked at this change, we are basing it on precedents that we have out in the West Creek Corporate Center area that contains 3 data centers today. These data centers range in size from 52,000 square feet up to 250,000 square feet. And we looked at the parking provisions on site, which range from 30 stalls to 60 stalls for the larger building. When visiting the site and looking at aerial photography of these sites, since you can only get so far in, the parking lots are rarely fully occupied. And that was something that we anticipated even with the construction of these first 3 data centers, is that they do tend to be lower parking users. However, at the time, we didn't have a parking code for a data center use, so we did base our parking provision based off of a warehouse use. We felt it was the most similar in nature, so that was the parking provision put in place at the time. So now that we have precedents out there, and it's been several years since these data centers have been in use, the amendment to change to 1 space for each 4,000 square feet would be consistent with the parking provisions that are currently out there. And the parking provision on CloudHQ's site would also meet that requirement. So the request to amend the parking requirement in PID 7 as proposed, staff believes is reasonable. In terms of the building height, again, going back to the concept plan approval for this project, it did indicate a height of 72 feet during that approval. So there was anticipation that PID 7 would have to be amended for the max building height. PID 7 currently lists the max building height as 36 feet. And this standard was put in place in 2017 when the site was rezoned as a part of the 4 data center proposal. So the height was consistent with the height that was shown on that 4 data center use and project. And just want to note that that's pretty typical when we do go through a rezoning process. When we do a plan district, we are curating the development standards based on the project that is before us. So that is why the 36 feet has been codified into the development standards. It was based on a previous plan that showed a 36-foot high building. The proposed maximum height that is requested for an amendment is to keep the 36 feet requirement on the existing buildings within the West Creek Corporate Center. And then for this lot in particular, allowing the 72.5 feet requirement or max building height. And that's based on the fact that the berm height, it differs on this site compared to the berm height on the southern data centers. So we are basing our analysis based on the screening that is able to be achieved on the CloudHQ site. So again, CloudHQ is proposing a 72.5 foot building. In addition to that, they're proposing a 30-foot tall berm plus landscaping on top of that berm. I also want to note that the difference between the 2017 approvals versus what is shown now is there is a pretty significant difference in the setback that is achieved from the east property line. So the building proposed this evening has been pushed to the west portion of the property to provide greater distance from the eastern property line and residential on that side to help mitigate some of the proximity there. So just for comparison, the 2017 proposal showed 150-foot setback from the east property line. The CloudHQ building is going to be 780 feet from that east property line, roughly. The north property line setback is consistent between both proposals. And going back to the cross sections that were provided earlier, this was looked at in terms of the reasonableness of the request to amend to a 72.5 foot building maximum, which shows the berming and landscaping mitigating or minimizing the views of the building substantially from the adjacent residential. So the request to amend the building height to 72.5 feet for this site is reasonable based on staff's analysis. And then lastly, the amendment to the PID 7 district for landscaping is based on kind of a different look at how we are looking at this site. This property requires over 1,500 trees, over 300 understory, and a substantial amount of shrubs. So they are deficient in all three categories that are required for this size of building. So they're deficient by 636 overstory trees, deficient by 67 understory, and 884 shrubs. So they do have a portion of the backside of their berm that could accommodate additional plantings. It would basically mean what you see on the north side would be implemented on the backside here in terms of plantings. However, it was considered whether or not there's better, more productive alternatives to placing those plantings in a more productive or public benefiting space, and also provide a more sustainable outcome for those plantings. So the few alternatives that we've explored on the front end is one, to install trees on the city-owned area east of the site to help bolster the residential screen edge, which they have placed 23 trees in this area that's immediately adjacent to the property, which is currently pretty open, just tall prairie grass out there today. That was one alternative. And then the second alternative would be to create a tree bank or collect a tree fund to capture the deficient landscape quantities and to be used in public benefiting spaces like public parks. And that is something that we would continue to coordinate on as we prepare for a final submission for this project. So something that the city is committed to doing, if that is considered a favorable route for the applicant to go down. Just to spell it out a little bit more, obviously, there were certain objectives and ordinance intents that needed to be met in order for us to even consider an alternative. So a couple of those objectives that we stated on the front end before we could consider alternatives were the following. They have to provide an amount of trees that get close to the full requirement, but also create a balanced, feasible, and sustainable outcome on the site. They did provide a 20-year landscape plan to show how the current plan that they're proposing can be sustained in the long term. There was also an objective to increase the amount of larger caliber trees on site that are required in the 3-inch, 3.5-inch, 4-inch, and 4.5-inch tree provisions beyond the 10% required threshold per our landscape ordinance. So bolstering those caliber inch quantities above the requirement so that on the front end of installation, they're putting in a majority of, and they're putting in the larger trees. And these trees, what they're providing is shown in bold here on this table above the 10% requirement. And these would be placed on the residential side of the berm. And then also kind of the most important is placing the priority on the berm side facing the residential to maximize the screening that they're able to achieve on the berm. So the plan that they propose is really maxing out every square inch on that berm side and on the top portion of the berm to help bolster that screen edge for the residential on the north and east sides. So getting into kind of our analysis of what's being proposed and where we're at. Obviously, this is a building scale that we have never seen before in front of us. And because of that, we're seeing a landscape requirement that is at probably the biggest we've ever seen. And therefore, it's requiring a substantial amount of landscaping out there. Our goal with the landscaping out here is multifaceted in terms of meeting the intent of our landscape ordinance, also meeting the intent of what the PID district requires for landscaping, and ensuring that the objectives that we went over are being met on site. The exhibit shown on the top side of this slide here indicates the available areas that they can landscape on site. The red indicates where they cannot landscape due to the building, parking, driving areas, ponding, and easements that are on site here. So they are, to what staff believes is a good faith effort in trying to fill in the site and direct their priority to the areas that have been defined. So we do feel this is a good faith effort in trying to get the most productive use of landscaping on the site. And placing the same amount of plantings on the backside of this berm doesn't seem to be the most productive use of landscaping for the site and what the intent of the ordinance is to help screen and provide that balanced outcome. We believe there are more productive alternatives that can be more beneficial to the public and the community by looking at other areas along the east edge here. There's probably more opportunity on the southeast side here in the city-owned area that can be filled in. Yeah.
Just to clarify, I think just explicitly state, so it's not that they're deficient because they don't want to put, the trees are maxed out, right? So that's the deal. So the trees are maxed. more or less
Mhm.
without overcrowding. And so we still want to have those trees elsewhere in the city or have like a tree bank.
Right.
Okay.
I think they could feasibly do it and get every
Sure. Then you just have
piece
like
of
woods.
quantity in there. However, it is a question of, is it going to be sustainable? It is a question of planting a forest on a side that may not be visually seen. So there's those questions that are coming into play here that we're trying to weigh out. The request is an alternative to look at a more creative, more beneficial option for those deficiencies.
Well, yeah, question, okay.
Sure. So from staff's point of view, and also with impending large projects, specifically a community park planned in the southwest area of the city, we do see this as a benefit to help provide the tree provisions for these areas that are going to be highly used by the community. So the request to amend the landscaping provisions within the PID 7 district for this site in particular, we find would be reasonable. So that concludes the proposal. So there's a couple motions you would be making this evening with this proposal. One would be to make a motion to recommend approval of the preliminary site and building plan, the preliminary plat, and the conditional use permit for CloudHQ, and then based on the conditions that are listed in the staff report. And then a motion to recommend approval of the zoning ordinance amendments to PID 7, and that's based on the draft ordinance. If this were to move forward this evening, I do want to note the city council date that it would go to, which would be Monday, October 21st. Happy to answer any questions. We do have the applicants in the audience, and then this will also require a public hearing too.
Thank you, Liz. A couple of quick questions. And it's kind of some minor things, I'm sure it's considered, but the homestead driveway. So it's technically part of it's not on the site, but it's still, it's like an easement between houses, basically. Is that going to be something the applicant would fill back in for the neighbors between their yards essentially? Or is the city gonna do that? How do we make sure that gets taken care of, where that goes back to
Yeah, that's,
city thing?
it is within a city-owned outlet today.
Okay,
However, I think that's a detail that we don't have specifics on quite yet in terms of how it'd be finished out, but maybe the applicant does know or understand kind of where they're at with that, because obviously it's going to be taken out
right.
as a part of the project. And so how would they finish it off?
Okay, the tree plan, 20-year plan for landscaping. Are they gonna draft up some sort of documents for enforcement of that? Is that for if trees die, they're gonna replace them, or is there any kind of documentation on that or anything been discussed in this 20-year plan?
And maybe I needed to clarify that a little bit. I mean, the point of the 20-year plan was to, which is shown on this exhibit here.
Like in 20 years?
Right.
Okay.
In terms of the scale of the canopy
Yep.
that the trees would get to at around that time, which is approaching near mature scale, we wanted to understand what that overlap may or may not look like to see if it looks like a sustainable plan. You know, we've also been in communication with the landscape architects too, to understand what a feasible plan looks like from their experience. And this is that plan. So in terms of replacements, I mean, that would come at kind of the same warranties that any other landscape plan would
I
have.
just think it'd be important. Obviously, there's gonna be a lot of trees.
Yep.
How we're gonna make it. If there should something be in the final development agreement that they have to replace trees or something of that nature.
Sure.
Then the tree fund, let's say they go the tree fund way or the tree bank, if you will. I noted, I heard you mention like, you know, you could use it in other spaces in the city, public places. I thought like, do they have to be public places? What if, you know, the immediate adjoining neighborhoods, their direct parks, if they have dead trees, or even if the neighbors themselves have like trees that aren't making it in their front boulevard, can this tree fund be used to help out adjacent neighbors that are right there as well? Like if they happen to have a dead tree or something like that. So, you know, it's kind of, they get something in return with these excess trees, since they're the ones potentially affected. Does that work if you cross over privately like that?
I think that's where the challenge would lie, Chair Brass. So I appreciate the creativity, but I think, you know, when we're looking at,
Everyone gets a tree?
excuse me, yeah, everyone gets a tree.
Oprah?
Yeah, when we're looking at the purpose of the ordinance, you know, the city requirements, it's really about the public benefit.
Yeah.
So I think you got to be careful when you start thinking about, you know, that line between private and
And
public.
at least maybe public parks right in this neighborhood, if there's a need for them, they could benefit first.
Yeah, potentially. I think, you know, we've talked with our public works director about, you know, how this could maybe work. And I think there's details that will be ironed out.
Yeah.
You know, I think there's a number of different things that could come into play here. There are opportunity, obviously, right? But in our existing parks, you know, we're working with Emerald Ash Borer. And so that's a big thing that we're trying to replace trees and actively prepare for the removal. See some of that happening already. So I think, you know, there's an opportunity within that as well.
Just to tag along on that one. I know in the past when we've run into landscaping issues on the commercial, on the industrial side of things, we've been a little lax on requiring the full allotment of landscaping on some of the requirements-ish. Because obviously they're trying to maximize the space and, you know, making sure that they're putting the landscaping in the parking lots and the medians and whatnot. But this one seems a little off because now it's the city is holding firm to our requirements and saying, well, you can't fill it in, but you can fill this bank for trees for Chaska and we can use it somewhere else. So it seems like this is, I don't want to use the word dirty, but it seems off compared to any of the other projects we've had come before us in the fact of we've required them to put the landscaping in their property. We haven't allowed them to say, well, if you don't create this fund and we'll put the plants somewhere else. I mean,
I don't know if I'm hearing a question there, but I guess maybe I have a couple of reactions.
this is the first time where I'm hearing that we're allowing a development come through and not hit their landscaping requirement, but yet fund a bank or provide an opportunity to fund a bank of to the city to be able to use the city to use it a different way.
I don't recall other developments that have been under.
No, but what I'm saying is they've hit their requirements.
Yeah.
But now this one can't hit the requirements. So we're saying, well, it's okay, you can't hit it. So
I think they
We'll allow-
can.
Well,
The
they
point
can,
is, they don't want to hit the requirements around the building. They want to for surely hit the requirements, you know, so the neighbors, you know,
They
have
could
a,
plant them all
berm.
out on the other side of the berm, which would be worthless to
Yeah,
anybody.
no, I
right,
understand, but at
because the
same-
public's not gonna,
well,
At the same time, we
benefit
should not be
inside.
giving an opportunity for the future developments to say, yeah, we can't meet the requirement and we can have it in fund, like as you said, like, I mean, we have only 100 trees need to be there. You can put 80, remaining 20, you can put it in that tree bank. We can open the floodgates for the other developments to say that this kind of
As long
practice.
as they
Right?
so as long as they fulfill.
I mean, the max, it's always depending on the size of the building, right? I mean, if imagine if the size of the building is little
Right.
less, probably they could have put more. I mean, it's always give and take. They wanted to put the maximum space. That is the reason why they can't put more, right?
If the building was half,
Yeah,
then it would
exactly.
have
I mean-
the landscaping.
So it's very
Mhm.
similar, like park dedication fees is what you're kind of modeling this on. So if,
Yeah, if I may, you are correct, Commissioner Olson, this is a new thought, right? I think we've had other examples of projects where in order to meet the landscape requirement, it's been probably more than a healthy planting that has occurred on the site, has raised questions around the long-term sustainability of it. And I think staff has heard from Planning Commission concern about that as well, and the desire to seek balance. I also want to give credit, to CloudHQ in this situation, the idea of, doing a sort of tree bank type of a thing. However, we end up getting the detail and define that with them, came from them. And the desire, they've acknowledged that, yes, they could get all of the trees on this site if that's what the city really wants. But, from their perspective, they would prefer to see that investment have more of a public facing benefit and landscaping on the interior of the berm in a location that's really not visible to anyone except the folks who are visiting the site specifically, right? So, that's a suggestion that they had made. And I think staff, looking at it in the analysis that Liz has given, views that as a reasonable outcome. I think if Planning Commission feels strongly that you see the whole thing landscaped like you're seeing on the neighborhood facing side of the berm, we could relook at that. But what we're trying to bring forward here is something that's more responsive to the feedback that we've heard from the commission in the past.
I mean, it's definitely a good idea to have somewhere else, but like, what is the timeline? I mean, that is also we need to be making sure, right? I mean, suppose the project is completed in next 2 years, we have the bank, but it's not used for until next 5 years, there is no use. I mean, we always need to have the balance, as Commissioner was saying. The park fund, right? We are taking some fund, some of the neighborhoods are not having tot lot. But like the nearby park, if you say some park, the proposed big park, planning to construct from last 5 years, we never know when it is going to come. Like surrounding some of the communities doesn't even have the tot lot. They have paid city for whatever the fees they wanted to pay, but the residents are not getting the benefit out of it because the park is not built yet. So we have to make sure like we are getting that additional tree bank, but we have to use it the right time. Probably that helps the city.
would the tree bank be more of a monetary thing? Obviously, they're not gonna have so they just pay for whatever the average cost of a tree would be. We'd have a fund that we would draw upon to use for other trees. I mean, I would imagine
I
something
think
like that.
that's the general idea.
Mhm,
Yep,
Just like park dedication,
mhm, right.
similar.
very similar.
Yep.
I have a question for
Yeah.
staff. Nate, could you help provide some more clarity as into the rationalization for allowing, or at least allowing the doubling of the size from the 36 to the 72 feet? Because the PID was set for 36 feet. CloudHQ knew that coming in. Staff knew that coming in.
We approved of that
and
concept.
None, but staff continued to allow that to come through. So I would like to know what's staff position on that? How did it come to be that way?
Perfect. Commissioner Olson, I feel you're giving staff a lot of credit. Thank you for that, but this is something that was discussed at concept. Staff,
Item in concept, and it was a side note with very little discussion. Because it was brought up as one line saying they're going to come through at preliminary for needing an amendment, and that was all that was discussed.
I think we had even renderings and berms at
There was-
concept.
there was
Yeah.
talking of it, but there was one statement of saying it's like they'll need an amendment. So
Sure,
there wasn't,
But the 72, like, we were aware of it, like, I had.
we were
berms
aware
and
it was tall,
renderings,
yes.
and it
But
said
the question
72.
is, but ultimately is like going back to the beginning. How did it get from the beginning of 72 feet versus knowing that it was planned for 36?
Sure, I think I understand the question, so I'll try to answer. At concept, CloudHQ has been very open with their intention from the start that they would propose a 72-foot building. Staff informed them of the conditions that are in the current zoning. That is something that was discussed at concept. It was presented to Planning Commission and City Council. There were renderings provided. The renderings that Liz showed today of the berm with the landscaping on it were also available in the concept packet. So that was shown then as well. So staff was pretty upfront, I think, from the onset with CloudHQ that if they wanted to pursue that height of a building, the sight lines would need to be a priority. And so the berming and the landscaping and being sensitive to what that outcome for the neighboring, for the existing neighborhood would be in the sightlines that they would experience, would be key in analyzing whether that could make sense or not. So CloudHQ has come forward with the building, and it's the building that they brought forward tonight is the same footprint and the same height, the same build or the same berm, with more landscaping on it than was presented in concept. So at the concept, what staff heard from Planning Commission was a recommendation to council for approval of that, knowing that the building was what it is, knowing that there would be a need for an amendment to the zoning. Council, we had that same discussion, and they approved that concept plan. And so I think that's what led CloudHQ to feel comfortable with coming forward at preliminary with what was approved in concept. And that's why we're coming forward with that recommendation that we are tonight based on the recommendation, the direction that was provided by the city council and their concept approval.
So it was assumed going into it that they were going to be allowed to get an amendment because
I think I would.
because it was recommended to us because it was presented to us and recommended to us that we should approve a concept, a 72-foot building. That's how it was presented to us.
That's correct.
Okay. I just want to make sure that that's how, yes, it was presented to us as a 72-foot building, the concept. But that's all it was. And
Commissioner Olson, we can only present to you what the applicant is asking for, right? I mean, so that's what was presented at concept. You all recommended approval. Council approved it.
but staff knew what was zoned for that lot at the time, which was 36.
Correct. And that was presented to you all.
Okay.
Yeah, we went through this, and I remember the berm too, because I was asking if some parts of the berm could be taller
Yeah.
for some of the
and there was
neighbors.
some,
If
like,
we could do like 5 more feet.
5 more feet and like where we
We
have
had a
the
whole
corners
discussion
and
on
all
it.
those things. Yeah.
Which, by the way, I did want to bring up, so some of the berm is taller in certain sections. It's an average of 30 feet roughly, is that correct?
I'll
It gets a
I
little.
will let
it's a-
the applicant
okay.
respond to
little
that.
shorter on some Parts and it might be
Yep.
50 feet taller in some
Yeah,
areas.
few homes like little, like there is a
Yeah, 'cause there
corner
was-
kind of thing. Yeah,
I think I
we were,
recall on the corner.
yeah, we asked at least like 5 more feet on the corners. Yeah.
Yeah.
And at least if they can consider that, that would be great because those are the direct impact or the direct line of the site for those things. Yep. We had that conversation.
I think it was brought up.
Yeah, we had that long conversation on that.
Not the amendment side of things, it wasn't, so. But, and one last question. I know in the 2040 comp plan, the green belt actually does touch that property. Can you please comment on that one for me? Because I know I brought that up in concept and it wasn't addressed. So,
Is that the west side?
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I recall that coming up in concept as well and having the discussion. So we did talk about it there. I think it's important to understand the comp plan in areas, especially in areas that are undeveloped. you know, it's hard to understand as we're putting those lines down exactly where that line will fall on development, right? And so that area that is, you know, guided, I don't know if it was rural residential or open, maybe
Open space, yeah.
open space.
wetland.
The intent there is to be incorporating areas that are wetlands or undevelopable. Okay, and so the area, and that's done by looking at aerial photos and trying to make a judgment call as to where those lines may actually be. Not until we get into the development process and understand and have gone through a wetland delineation, can we really fully understand exactly where that delineation occurs. That's why we go through the delineation process for things like wetlands, wooded steep slopes, and other things like that. Through this development process, we found out that, you know, that line, you know, was covering areas that are developable. And so therefore, you know, we're in a position of recommending that we permit the development to happen in developable areas.
So now fast forward, and because the greenbelt continues down to the south, down towards the Fleet Farm, and when we continue to develop, we're going to cross into that greenbelt area again. So we're going to have this conversation again. So it really doesn't mean anything. I guess we presented in the 2040 comp plan about protecting the barrier around Chaska. It's been there for decades. And now the first time we actually come close to it, we just plow right through it. And I do have a concern about that because
This
we're not,
particular parcel is not designed to be part of the greenbelt. Much of the greenbelt and the tool that we use to try to, that is guided rural residential. And there's policies around how that can develop.
it's very clear that the greenbelt crossed over the Laketown Township border and into this parcel. So it's very clear in the 2040 comp plan that the greenbelt crossed over. So I guess that's the part where I've got high concerns about what's going on with this parcel and how it's conflicting against our 2040 comp plan. And I brought it up at concept and it's still not addressed. And we're just kind of walking past it because they're developing the whole thing. But yet it's going against everything that Chaska's been for the last 30 years since we created the Greenbelt. So it just kind of tells us where we're at right now. So I'm kind of disappointed.
Is there other questions for staff amongst us? I would imagine some of you guys have questions before we open a public hearing.
Yeah, I'd like to hear from the public.
Okay, so any other, before I open public hearing, questions for staff?
None.
Amongst yourselves?
We were asking about the additional height of the berm, like if the developer is there, they do consider anything of that, probably ask that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
they're-
when they come forward.
For sure.
yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so public hearing, so at 8:08, I will open the public hearing. So anyone like to come forward and speak, including the applicant, neighbors, or anyone, now is your time. When you come forward, please state your name and address for the file, thanks.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Brett Burnett. I'm here on behalf of CloudHQ. I'm Director of Development. My address is 55 Inverness Road, Fairfax, Virginia. We are a hyperscale data center development company based in Washington, D.C. We have projects throughout the United States and several international countries as well. It's a pleasure to be back here in the great city of Chaska. It's been 2 years since we were here last, but I just wanted to reiterate our excitement about developing in the city. The data center world, as you see lots of places, is changing frequently. It's very dynamic. A lot of items that need to be sorted out to do a project of this size that we've been working through, power being one of those, and the timing to get power for the project. But we're very committed to being a part of this community and bringing this project forward, and just wanted to say thank you very much for your consideration. So we have some team members here to help answer any questions you guys have about the project. Specific to the landscaping, I just wanted to say, absolutely appreciate the commentary. This is a unique project. I think for the city of Chaska, it's a unique project for us in a lot of ways. This is by far the largest berm that we've ever installed on a project. We have berms on a lot of our projects. 30 feet is by far the largest we've ever done. 1,200 trees and 1,500 shrubs is certainly significant. I wanted to commend Nate and Liz for their diligent work on the entire process and project, but specifically on that piece, it's been very collaborative. And the reason we brought forward is this alternative idea and concept was to present an array of options whereby we feel it's more beneficial to the public for all the reasons that you guys have stated. It's a data center. It's mostly housing computer equipment. The humans that are occupying the office space are primarily in the northwest corner of the site. So we've beefed up the landscaping on that part of it. But a 30-foot berm obviously is stepping down on the interior side on the north and the east side of the sites. We don't feel like it is providing a lot of public benefit to build the forest that we have on the residential side. I think the forest we're building on the residential side is very warranted in this case. There's a very nice residential community there. Just wanted to also reiterate the plan that you saw on there with the renderings. That was from what we brought a concept plan. That was a 25% of code plan for trees. We're now at 61%. So it's well over double what was shown there. And another point I think is important, that mix of trees was high on the 2 to 3 caliper inch on the original concept plan. We're now much heavier on the 3.5 to 4.5. So we paid particular attention not to just the 20-year plan, but also to the day one plan and what it will look like for the residents when it gets first built. And I think that's absolutely important in this case. So just want to reiterate our commitment to the city of Chaska. Thank you all for your consideration. Our team is here, happy to answer any questions that you guys might have.
All right, Brett, the berm. So let's start right off on that. When got a conditional use permit about a year ago, obviously I understand not moving dirt until you feel comfortable in the development. When is the anticipated time to start working on the berm?
So the berm, as you know, has to be done before we start vertical construction on the building. We hope to start the berm end of this year, early next year. Like you said, we didn't want to start the berm well in advance of the building, the timeline to receive power. We're working with several agencies on that, so it's been a process. We've made good progress there, but we didn't want to start the berm and then not be able to start the building for a long time because the receipt of power had been pushed out a year to a year and a half. But to answer the question about the berm, we hope to start that end of this year, early next year. We anticipate it'll take no more than 1 year to complete, likely faster than that. So a lot of that depends on the dirt availability. This is 300,000 cubic yards. It's fairly significant.
You'll be doing the berm in tandem with like probably doing footings and foundation. So the berm will be done before vertical.
Correct. And when we start foundations is going to be dependent on when we have a tenant to take the building. For a lot of reasons, speculative data centers don't really get built. They're very capital intensive. They're fairly customized buildings. It's not a good use for the city to build a building this size that doesn't have a tenant to take the space for a lot of reasons. So when we start foundations is going to depend on when we have a tenant to occupy the building. We are making really good progress to that end.
I realize that, so you're doing, this is a spec development basically, or you're kind of a build to suit basically? You're looking for whoever it may be, Meta, Google, Amazon.
Correct. We are a hyperscale single tenant builder. There are only so many of those types of tenants that exist. So we're having really good conversations with several of them. There's one in particular tenant that has shown the most interest, and that's the building we've designed is primarily based on their design, but it can accommodate other tenants should we shift to that.
Yeah.
But to answer the question, we would likely start the berm early when we feel strongly we're moving forward, but we're not going to start foundation or any vertical work on the building without,
It's a sign.
Yeah.
Yeah.
or it's going to be eminently signed.
Okay.
I'm jumping.
Go ahead. Yeah, go, absolutely, go for it.
Okay, I think you were the person that spoke to us during concept, correct?
Yes.
I scribbled your name down, my handwriting's really horrible. Okay, so, my big concern
She has those
with,
notes.
data centers is the noise. And Northern Virginia, if that's, that's an issue out there because of how tightly packed people are and how close some of those data centers are to residential areas. And I suspect there's some folks from the neighborhood that expressed similar concerns. Now, they did do the noise analysis that was in the packet. And it was based on computer simulations, talked about the decibel levels, but it didn't kind of address the frequency, and I'll use an analogy. Yes, a jet engine is louder than a mosquito, but if that mosquito is in your ear 24/7, it's pretty darn impactful. So can you talk a little bit more about, so you got the 30-foot berm, great for aesthetics to, shield some of the neighborhood, but you have got a lot of equipment on the roof of that building. So give us some confidence that that is addressed and that the folks that live in that neighborhood aren't going to be listening to that 24/7. I mean, Engler Boulevard's loud enough, but talk to us a little bit about the mechanics there.
Absolutely. So we have Kimley Horn and Tad as our sound expert, so I definitely want to bring him up to talk more specifics about it. But just speaking in general terms, as I'm not the sound engineer, the projects that you speak of that are well advertised in Northern Virginia do not have any sort of berm, have much less landscaping than we have. And the equipment that you're speaking of, the chillers that are on the roof, are a different type of equipment than we're proposing to use here. They're older. There's been a lot of advances in technology in terms of sound mitigation techniques that are available to mechanical equipment since those were built. And there's been a lot of rework by that particular tenant to retrofit to mechanical equipment now that is not causing that issue. So I think part of that was a design miscalculation. Part of it was just equipment has advanced a lot since then. And I think this unique situation we're in with 30 feet berm and lots of landscaping on it is a different profile than that particular site. But Tad, you want to come speak specifically about more than just that? He can talk about other noise related items.
Yeah,
Feel
no,
free.
of course. Good evening, y'all. How you doing today? So,
Name and
oh, yes, sorry. Tad Hardy with Kimley Horn and Associates. And I am in our Charlotte, North Carolina office at 200 South Tryon Street. So yeah, so as Brett was mentioning, a lot of the things that are proposed as part of this development, from a mechanical equipment standpoint, are newer, more technologically advanced, quieter in some sense as well. The modeling that we did for this site took into account all the frequency spectra that the manufacturers provided to us. And when that is input into the model, we're able to kind of see what that looks like in the surrounding areas. And the model also took into account the shielding that's provided from the barrier that's on top of the building, the penthouse area, the berming itself. So everything that's been proposed as part of this site was included in the model to give confidence that the noise levels themselves weren't going to be impactful. And based on the modeled output, we were, during a typical operational scenario where the rooftop coolers are running, we're below the nighttime threshold at 100%, operational status. The coolers are proposed to be upfit with low sound fans across the board. So that's another perk that's kind of already been added in. And then also all the generators that are proposed to be on site will be upfit with hospital grade silencers that reduce various frequencies by anywhere from 35 decibels up to 45 decibels, which once again keeps the noise levels in check. And so when we looked at the full-blown emergency operational scenarios, the silencers that are going to be on the generators allowed the noise levels during those emergency situations to really only go up a couple decibels. But we're still below the state rule thresholds for noise levels within residential areas.
And then outside of the emergency scenario, generators run every so often, just fast, I would imagine, or?
Yeah, so every generator has to be, it's a couple hours per generator, but they only occur one at a time.
Sure.
So only one generator would be tested throughout the year. So no more than one. And yeah, once again, the operations, those testing periods are, I think, a couple hours, 2 to 3 or 2 to 5 hours throughout the entire year. So it might be one the first half, or a couple hours the first half, a couple hours the second half of the year, but they're only operating one at a time when they do that testing.
So then in the major power outage, then the generators come on, you got medical grade silencers, and you're still below the threshold. You said you're below the threshold for statutory guidelines in a residential neighborhood.
Yeah, the Minnesota state rule has a limit of 50 during the nighttime for L50, which means 50% of a given hour, you can't be above 50. And we were below that if everything was operating for an entire hour.
So the chillers that you talk about that you did the modeling with, has CloudHQ actually installed any of these in any of your data centers before?
This specific model, I'm not 100% sure of.
Yeah, thanks, Ted. So we actually have a project that we call LC4, which is where I work in Ashburn. It's our newest large-scale facility. It's a 3-story facility, but the square footage is very similar. It has the adiabatic dry chillers that we're talking about here installed. There's residential right across the street. It's not directly adjacent like this project is, but there's no berm in that case. And we have not had any issues with that facility.
How adjacent are they?
It's across a 4-lane highway. And then
So they wouldn't know any different because they have a 4-lane
Lane
highway.
highway in Northern Virginia.
I say that because obviously 4-lane highway is going to be a lot different than Schoolmaster Drive. So. But do you have any other comparable size data centers that are right next to residential?
We do.
This close proximity to residential.
We do. We have one in Ashburn, and then our company, the predecessor company, did 2 in Illinois, in Chicago, that are basically across. One is directly adjacent to residential, one is across a 2-lane road from residential. And we have not had any noise complaints, even during outage situations, for either the general noise of the fans or the generator noise. Our program is a little different than some other developers, whereby we have the generators in enclosed structures other than in containers in a yard. So.
Yeah, so they're fully enclosed.
Correct.
Not
Different
exterior-
profile.
Exterior to the building, they're
No.
inside.
Correct. So there's more options for noise mitigation. One, because they're encased in concrete, but you can build in other types of systems that are different than what some would use when you put them in containers in a mechanical yard, for example.
Sure. So Tad, whatever the modeling showed for the noise, can you give for instance, like a comparison of what level of, how they, football stadium or, hair dryer? I mean, do you have any idea?
Not
Like,
loud.
no, I know, but like trying to give you like a such a, right? Can you give me some sort of like?
So yeah, when we were wrapping up the modeling, I guess the overall noise level for the typical operational scenario was about 47. And that would be like your dishwasher running in the kitchen while you're like around the corner. So
You know, that,
It's nothing that's scary.
right,
But yeah, I mean, it would be similar to kind of the interior of your home
Yeah.
minus a football game on the TV or something.
sure. Okay, and so, and then that's the output of the noise, but then you have the distance, the trees, the berming. So that's what you're saying is you feel confident it's gonna be quite contained.
Yeah, and over time, I mean, we've talked about the maturing of the landscaping. Over time, the environmental noise that would, I guess, be part of the ambient noise environment, insects, birds, wind in those trees would likely be more dominant after the fact.
Eavesdropping, sure. Yep, I mean, it seems like you guys have been very appreciated because we do have residences. You know, and we have industrial areas where certainly truck traffic logistics would be louder than this, right? Manufacturing facilities.
And I'll say that I have not actually modeled a berm as large as what Cloud is planning on putting in. The largest I've done was for an industrial site, and it was a 25-foot berm and has worked wonders. It's installed, everything's operational. And the fact that this one is larger, is more landscaped. It's, I mean, it's once again above and beyond what I've seen and dealt with over the 12 years I've been doing acoustics.
Modeling though.
Mhm.
So it's as good as the information you put into it.
So yeah,
Right, and I will just go with you can make any answer you want with a computer model. And obviously, I hate to say it, they wrote your paycheck, so they're getting the answer that they want. So I'm going to be the skeptic on this one. And a dishwasher running all the time in my backyard is probably not something I want to hear either. Or just the confidence of knowing that that's a minimal annoyance. Yes, the landscaping, the berming, yes, they're trying to do everything we can, but there's still the uncertainty of what if? Because what if the model is wrong? What if the chillers don't work? What if? And that's what we're here for. And that's what I'm still concerned about because obviously we
have that with any operation.
we can't, I mean, obviously, I
There's a
mean.
lot of what ifs in everything we
Right.
do.
So I mean, for my side of things is, yeah, I would love to cut the building in half, reduce the sound, reduce the berm. I think a lot of this goes away. But I don't think they're willing to do that because that's not their business.
We could have a
But-
manufacturing facility stamped in metal,
But,
like what?
but I think the thing is, we need to make sure that we put assurances in that the sound side of things isn't the problem because the residents here are here.
I think
So-
the statute, there's law.
Well, but the state statutory is before data centers were created. Think about it.
But nonetheless, it's still sound. If it goes above the sound, it's still law. Right? There's statutory law.
But
Yeah,
it's based on before data centers and data centers we
But-
know are different sounds.
I think there are already a couple of data centers there, right? I mean.
Yeah, there's data centers, there's
Yeah.
4 of them there.
I think the biggest one is like 1/3 of the size of the existing data, whatever they
When you combine
proposing. So,
together, it's probably,
yeah, probably the same of, I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, half, yeah,
or the footprint, 700,000 is the footprint, so it might be
Yeah.
close to.
close to half of what they're proposing. So definitely there might be some like visual proof what is there if the data center is making that much of noise or something.
I used to live next to the United.
And those data centers were old. I mean, as they are saying, like the technology definitely advanced. So
Yeah, I popped.
there shouldn't be.
All I
lot of-
heard was angler.
Yeah, I lived.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Next to the United
so-
South in my backyard for years. It was fine for me. So I know the what ifs that you're saying, like Commissioner Purdy, I mean, you could do that with everything.
Right.
The United Health one is older. I assume this is much newer.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, much newer definitely will give more advanced technology and more noise reduction techniques and all these things in place. So I don't see any, yeah.
Yeah, that I would just say, we can sit here and tell you we're gonna do anything, but until it's built, we can't really show that we're going to do it. But my commitment to you is throughout construction and operations, we're gonna have both vibration and noise monitoring systems in place. And I would welcome anybody to come out and test either one of those anytime. And if we're not in compliance with the state, with the city code, so it's 55 dB daytime and 50 at night, I believe, we have to rectify that. Just like anyone else would have to rectify any other violation of code in the city.
While we're at it, talking about construction. I'm sure you've talked with the city. We're gonna have concerns from neighbors, construction activity, dust mitigation, control. Got a full program for this, for dust, watering the dirt or construction site. I mean, what's the process?
So we're working with very well-known contractors that have worked in this area on big projects near residential. So they're very familiar with, again, the city and state level code requirements during construction, hours of operation, mitigation techniques that are required to make sure that there are not issues arising. And if there are issues, that there's means to solve those. So again, absolutely appreciate this is right next to a very nice residential community. There's going to be a lot of focus on that. We want to be good neighbors. We want to be good stewards. We've committed to continuing to monitor our project email address for any questions that arise. I look at that and our construction team looks at that daily. So absolutely, there's a program in place to make sure that doesn't become an issue. But if those things do become an issue, I would welcome the public to let us know and we'll work to address it as we have to.
You're gonna have a public email address where people can email if they have an issue or complaint or.
We do actually already.
Can-
Yeah, it's chaska-info@cloudhq.com. And it's been live since we first started this in early 2022. And we have actually received probably 10, 12 emails in there and
I wasn't aware of that. It's actually a pretty good idea.
yeah.
Further questions for the applicant before we move on to neighbors or other visitors? I mean, some of the stuff that Liz discussed, parking, I understand it, right?
Yeah,
Landscape
makes
already
sense.
talked about.
I would say on landscaping, I would like to see more of the large caliper.
Yes.
I mean,
I think they
the
mentioned-
you say you have more percentage, but the actual calipers are missing. So I would much rather see you hit the calipers of the large size trees. And if you miss on the lower ones, fine, but get the large trees in there and start early versus.
But at the same time, I mean, we can put so many in that place, right? I mean, if you
Right.
try to put so many into that same space, I mean,
Okay.
it might not sustain. I mean,
Correct.
they can put it, but like after 3-4 months, they die. I mean, they can keep on replacing. We have to have the balance. In that.
Well,
However,
balance, but-
Easily, there's feasible,
Yeah.
feasibly possible.
Possible,
right?
yeah,
So-
exactly. And that is also on the top of 30 feet, most of
Yeah,
them.
right,
I mean,
it's
it's
a-
not like a flat
City
surface
will
or
work
anything, you
with
know.
the applicant, obviously, on determining the final ratio of calipers and the landscape consultant or environmental engineer, or whoever it may be. Okay,
Is there a question? I'm sorry.
no, I'm just saying,
Yes,
like, you would work with
Yeah.
them in determining the appropriate large caliper that we don't have potential for mass death of trees.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've had a few conversations with their landscape architect team to understand from their point of view and their expertise of what is the most sustainable caliber inch that they can get out there that can sustain at least long-term as it grows in. And the message we've been hearing from them is that 4.5 is kind of the largest out there. And if you have further questions on that, I'd probably want them to kind of speak to that, but that's what we've heard.
It's not really a question. It's more of how can we get more of the 4.5s? And if they have to shy less of the
Mhm.
2s, then fine, it's like, but way more towards the larger
Sure.
calipers and less of the smaller. So.
Further questions for the applicant? City?
One other piece on parking, just to add it in. The building I mentioned, LC4, that's similar square footage is 3 stories, but 1.4 million square feet. That site has 150 spaces and we're proposing 235 here. 150 has been plenty for that location. We're fine with 235, but that's in Ashburn where there's 175 data centers. So there's a lot of data about.
Sorry,
kids
how
in the
many?
facilities. A lot.
35?
In Loudoun County, I think there's about, was 172 recently, so.
What's the draw? Is there nuclear power or something, or what's the deal?
Goes back to the founding of the internet. May East, which was the major fiber landing, started in actually Fairfax County in a parking garage in a closet. And then they expanded to the first, to an entire office floor. And they got to the point as the internet was growing in the late 90s, early 2000s, they needed more space. So they went to the county to invest in power and fiber infrastructure. Fairfax County wasn't really familiar with that data centers in general. Loudoun County was still very much a rural area looking for growth in their commercial tax base. So they invested in the infrastructure. The hub of May East moved to right down the street from where I work, Loudoun County Parkway and Wax Pool. And that started the
It's kind of snowball.
and and historically, there's been a lot of benefits to having data centers near other data centers for latency purposes. Transactions that are either financial based or customer facing benefit a lot from high speed transactions. The world is changing now because a lot of what is done is not customer facing. It's building systems to power different types of searches. So that's probably more than you want to know, but there's a great book called Tubes.
So when you
about the
like
history of the
click
internet. That's
Apple
awesome.
Pay, and you get the instant purchase.
Yeah,
Better to have data centers next to each other for communication wise, basically.
that's right.
There's less latency between transactions.
That's right. But you see, huge hyperscale data centers in not around anything else. And those are kind of building the systems that support the customer facing programs. So they don't need to be as quick because they're not directly accessing, a query on ChatGPT or something like that.
So for us, there was the parking, which is a change, but it's less and that makes
Right.
sense.
Yeah.
There's the landscape, we've talked about that. There's the plat, it's all one site. And then the substation. Do we have any questions on the substation power? Okay. Anyone else like to address the commission? Now is your time. The public hearing is still open.
There is one person online that has their hand raised, so.
Okay.
Oh, is that me? I apologize. The one question my name is David LePage. I live on 1987 Schoolmaster Drive. I bought up against the farm. I'm not sure, I forget the farmer's name, but so the berm. So there is a concern on my perspective from irrigation. Because we have a culvert that goes on the backside. So a berm is going to, like when it rains, for example, right? I mean, I don't have this problem existing because I don't have a berm there. But when there is a berm there, and it's going to be, I guess, maybe 100 or 150 feet from the back part of my property, that water is going to run off down into my culvert. I mean, have there been any considerations for irrigation with a berm in that back facility?
Did you mean irrigation? Like you mean like water runoff control?
Yeah, that's part of it. Yeah, that's only part.
Irrigation would be more like sprinkler system. Do you mean
No,
control?
no. I'm talking about like water runoff. Yeah, I mean
Yeah.
like,
Drainage.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Stormwater runoff.
well, I mean, like anytime when it rains, everything goes, everything flows from Schoolmaster Drive down into a culvert. I bought my house 17 years ago, from Town and Country. And I guess, soon divested to K Hovnanian and the culvert, I'm kind of at like 1987 Schoolmaster Drive. I'm like, most of the water kind of runs off of the back 40 in my backyard, effectively. It runs off and it flows from one side to the other. A berm is going to provide a lot more water in my back 40. And so I guess I'm concerned about like, what is that? I mean, I have a sump pump in the back of my house. I'm just concerned, or I'm asking if anyone has considered water runoff with a berm. Because basically, if you put a berm up on the backside of even if it's 100 feet or 200 feet outside, the water is it's a hill, right? So the water's gonna come run towards my house.
Yep, I think we have someone here that's gonna speak. I think we understand your concern.
Yeah,
Appreciate it. I'll let someone try to address the question, it looks like here.
okay, thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners, Chair. My name is Tricia C. and I'm a civil engineer with Kimley Horn. Address is 11995 Singletree Lane in Eden Prairie. To answer your question, yes, on the backside of the berm, there's going to be a pretty significant swale. So from the properties, from the houses, I know they kind of go back, you know, a lot of them go back towards the CloudHQ property. So there'll be a swale that will collect, you know, not only the runoff that goes off of the residential properties, but also comes off of the berm. And then that swale, either on the ends of it, it will come around to the stormwater treatment ponds, or in the middle of the berm on the north side, there's dual culverts, one for redundancy that will bring the stormwater through. So it has been very thoroughly engineered, and on some of the plans that are part of the packet, there's a lot of contours with a 30-foot berm, but if you look closely at the contours on the north side, you'll see that there's swales that will carry that water either around or through.
I
And
still
even,
think
like
a
I said,
30-foot
redundancy for
berm,
the pipe.
I apologize for interrupting, but I still think a 30-foot berm is not, I'm not sure exactly where it was surveyed from. It probably from the front porch, but I mean, if you were surveying from my street level, for example, like if you walked out into the front of my house, 1987 Schoolmaster Drive, and you took a survey, if you just pointed the laser like back, you would get a number, which is like, so a 30-foot berm, actually, by the time you get from my front to the back of my house, I'm already 25 feet above the ground. So once you get into my second story, I mean, a 30-foot berm, I'm not sure if you're expecting that to cover, or if the point is that you should be hiding CloudHQ on the backside, 30-foot is not going to cover it on Schoolmaster.
All right, what was your name again?
David LePage.
David, so are we switching questions now to visibility?
I'm just making a point. That's all. Yeah.
I'm just trying to understand for the commission, because you were talking about the water. I think she answered your question.
No, yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the water question. Yes, I did switch
Yeah, I
questions.
just want to close the loop on what your question was and that it was answered or not.
Yeah, no, it was answered. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah. Fantastic. But yeah, I mean, I definitely have to, I probably will sell my house in like a very short period of time, just because I'm actually not really super fond of plans. I mean, I work in software, and I work, you know, I have a lot of different things, but yeah, it's kind of encroaching on my property. So yeah, I mean, I think your plans sound good, but I personally have concerns. Just a couple.
Okay. Thank you.
Chair, would you like me to try to respond to the
If you can.
elevation question? Yeah, so the berm, and then actually I wanted to speak anyway to answer your earlier question about the height of the berm and if it's consistent. So I think they tie in together. So everything, the berm height, where we say it's like 30 feet plus or minus 1 foot. So it was very consistently 30 feet. Where you'll see it, like from, if you're looking at it in the horizon, it'll look like it's going like this, because that's how the existing grade goes. And we're measuring it from the property line, like from that northern property line. So from that property line, it's going to be 30 feet.
Okay.
And then some of the renderings, if you look closely at what we did with the cross sections, the cross sections show that line of sight from like, you know, midway up what would be the house. Like we have the contours for where, you know, some representative lots go up, and we show that line from what would be approximately like the main floor, you know, not the basement, but kind of the main floor. So we tried to be really considerate and take that into consideration, that we know a lot of these are like walkouts, right? So we looked at that line of sight from what would be like, you know, your kitchen window.
Yeah. Yep, and so it actually is gonna follow, the 30 feet will actually follow the natural grade, so it'll be kind of.
Yeah, so I think it'll look nice instead of looking like it's, you know, straight across, right,
So there'll be some natural variation,
right,
trees then too at different
the trees
heights.
are, yeah.
correct. Yep,
Yeah, got it.
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you as well.
Hey, how you doing?
Yes.
Brent Chinook, 1957 Schoolmaster Drive.
Right?
Yeah, Brent. David, thanks for sharing. I live probably down the street from him. Couple of questions for CloudHQ. The building is gonna be 72 feet high. Does that include any of the chillers and things that go on top, or is that height go on top of that?
That's everything.
That's everything, yeah.
That's the very tip of it? Okay.
Everything's enclosed.
Everything's inside.
Okay. Are there any lights that are gonna be at the top? I know the parking is gonna be on the north side of this. I think the current data centers are pretty well lit up in the parking lot. Are we gonna throw a bunch of lights up there and that's gonna light up the whole sky and the whole neighborhood on the backside?
From a sustainability standpoint, Carlos Goddard,
Yeah, or even the city light building. Go ahead.
Carlos Goddard with CloudHQ, oversee the civil, structural, and architectural, as an architect for Cloud. So for lighting in general, we try to match sustainability concerns as well for LEED and others. And some of those requirements also require downlights and some considerations for bird control. And so there are some considerations as the design progresses to address some of the lighting pollution.
I think the answer, I think I saw this in the packet, isn't the max height like 28 feet or 30, and it's down lighting?
Yep,
There's not gonna be lights at the top of the building.
no, at least that's not what the photometric plans. They're gonna be doing,
Shows the lights.
yep, downlighting,
Yep.
um,
Like mid-height of the building or lower, right? It's-
right,
Yep,
around 18 feet, yep.
okay. So if that answers your question, Brent, it's not, there's not lights on top of it. It's not gonna be like a helicopter pad or whatever.
Yeah, there's minimal life safety lights in the enclosed mechanical area, so you can walk up there if we need to, but there's no exterior intruding lights from the top.
Okay, that's good. Great. I did want to kind of echo David's response. I think looking at all of the schoolmaster and how that's set up right now, all of the lots kind of slope down.
Yeah.
I know all the lots next to me get drainage issues. That's a huge problem. So I'm glad that's being addressed, but frequently when it rains, a lot of the backyards flood. And if there's a berm there that's causing extra rainwater, that's going to be a huge problem. But yeah, I'd be interested to know more if the 30 feet berm is going to be from the edge of the property. My property line from my house probably drops down 20 feet. So there's not going to be much of a berm there. I know we're going to put some trees on top of it, but from my bedroom window, I'm going to be able to see CloudHQ and the front entrance and everything. I know we're going to have some trees there, but they're not going to be mature for another 20 years or 15 years. That's a huge problem. I don't know if we're trying to hide it like you said, but the 30-foot berm sounds huge, right? But it's not that big because we're going to be starting from a pretty low spot. And the facility in itself is in a pretty low valley. I can kind of look down on that as it is today. I don't know, maybe taking a look at holistically, what is this whole gradient and 30 feet is the amount of drop that we're seeing already and terrain there. I think you're going to have full view of CloudHQ. And it sounds like it's not going to be CloudHQ. It's going to be sold to somebody else that's going to be responsible for actually meeting some of these regulations. Thanks.
We have one person in line as well.
Okay.
Dave, you're welcome to start talking.
Okay, good evening, everyone. I'll just share my screen here. You know,
I
Okay, I
don't
guess
believe we have
I have to,
capability for that.
Yeah.
I have to send a request, to share my screen.
I don't think we allow that. From a policy standpoint, we don't allow
Okay,
screens to be shared.
well, that's too bad because I got about 25 slides. Um, okay, well, I'll go into my spiel. It would have been a lot better, because many of us are really visually oriented, and what we're talking about here is visual. Is visual. Um, so my name is David Riley. I live at 1977 Schoolmaster Drive, and I'm a civil engineer. I'm registered, professionally licensed in the state of Minnesota for 22 years. And yeah, I sat on the planning commission, right where all of you are sitting at right now for 3 years, and it was really a way for me to give back to my community, and so I appreciate what you're all doing tonight and giving back to your community. I'm sure you have things on a Wednesday night that you could be doing with your family and friends or hobbies, what have you. So just I do recognize that and do appreciate it. First point I do want to touch upon is that this is a three-step process, right? We go concept, preliminary, final. In addition, there's things like these zoning amendments that require public hearings. It's public input all the way along, and the commitment that you make as a planning commissioner is that you don't prejudge. And I hear a number of you have already predisposed an opinion, here, and it's not per your charter, that this is a public hearing, that the contractor or the developer here with CloudHQ, they're at risk. Because if you do have an open mind and you hear these neighbors and what we're telling you is that you should be unbiased and objective, and that if you do that, there is a more than a 50% chance that you're not going to approve the particularly the zoning amendments that they're requesting here tonight. So, as I leave that with you, and please, don't take it as a personal affront. It's just the truth and the fact of the matter. So, listen with an open mind with what I'm going to tell you. You talk about, this 72 feet being discussed at the concept level, and I would have been at the meeting. I was, if I'm trying to think back of it, I was on a cruise in a different time zone in the world, and you know what? I was reliant upon you as commissioners to do what's right and vet this out. And so you're 72 feet, you may have talked about it for 5 minutes or 10 minutes. But I tell you what, I've lived in this property, for 17 years. And I've followed, this process, very closely. In 17 years is worth a lot more than the 5 to 10 minutes that you discussed it at the concept level. So let me tell you a little bit about Clover Ridge, all right?
Dave?
Yeah?
Dave, are you there? I think we did your whole packet in the submission, and we have reviewed it, and we have a packed crowd. So I would like, if it's kind of, you've been on the commission, I appreciate your input, fellow commission.
No,
If you could go,
Rob, I'm not going to be
if you could
cut
go
off.
on- If you
No,
can go
Rob,
on
I'm
to-
going to take my time. This is a public hearing, and I've spent significant amount of time not only communicating with staff and verbally as well as in writing, and now this is my opportunity to talk to you as the
Certainly,
commissioner.
Dave.
And
I would like to
I will proceed as
No-
efficiently
no-
as possible.
But no one's
But
allowed
there is a
endless
number of
time.
points that I need to make.
Dave, I understand that. I just want to say up front, please, stick to the main points. If it's been discussed before, kind of same deal that, when you were on the commission as well.
I
So
will
all I'm
tell
asking
you
is
that
to-
I have personally went door to door with my neighbors, and I speak for them. And
Yeah,
by
well, I just-
you letting
listen,
me, letting you went hearing me out, this meeting will go more efficiently.
Well, if you're trying to overtalk me, then it won't. So we have a crowd here. We have other people on the agenda. We have 2 other action items and they're patiently waiting as well. So if you can get to the things that are a problem and it hasn't been discussed already, we'd love to hear them. But,
All
we do
right.
have other people, and for respect of other people in this crowd tonight, they would like to have their action items up as well.
You know what, Rob, I've lived here 17 years. You're in my backyard and I'm going to tell you what I want to tell you. So,
That's fine. I appreciate that.
okay. All right. So, yeah, if I roll down through here, and I do appreciate what Brent and Tad you had to offer, and I appreciate your professionalism and knowledge. You know, some things that you got to understand is the size of this building. I've got visual aids. I mean, this thing's massive, right? So, if you think about US Bank Stadium, this building is the square footage of it is 2.5 times what US Bank Stadium is. And so that's what's going in our backyard. So think of that scale. When we talk about, my neighbors make a great point that all of our houses are actually at the street level or higher. So when you think about a 30-foot berm and the landscaping on top, it's the visual aids that you're providing are just not to scale and representative.
So you're saying that they've misrepresented the scale on this?
They have it doesn't work. And yeah, so if you think about with like what PID 7 is it's a commitment to the neighborhood, is to provide an area for offices and clean and quiet, and I think they've adequately talked about quiet, industrial and related uses that can be developed and operated in a high quality physical environment, one that complements and is compatible with the natural beauty found along West Chaska Creek and its adjacent residential developments. So, what we're talking about, like I said, is this building that is massive, and then it's also 7 stories tall. You talk about 72 feet. Think of the scale of 72 feet. 7-story office building. The 212 Medical Center is 6 stories tall that they just put the height addition on. So not only is it massive, it's tall, right? And so what my neighbors are telling you is, just from common sense, we're going to see probably the top 25 feet of this building, you for the foreseeable future, if not forever. And it's not a building. When this thing is 1,500 feet long, it's a wall. You're looking at a wall. That north and you know, so the zoning is there to protect us from this type of scenario. The zoning was put in place as a way to find a compatible use of that property with our residential neighborhood. I can tell you what, I'm savvy at this, right? I'm in this business. So before we bought our house, ours was a spec home from K. Hovnanian. It was built. Before we purchased the house, I called, Kevin, who was the planner at the time, and I had the conversation. Hey, Kevin, what's happening in that field back there? And specifically was told 300-foot buffer, 30-foot tall berm that's going to be landscaped, and the building heights are going to be limited to 36 feet. So my wife's in the audience there, and she can attest to it that when we were with our realtor, we stood up in the upstairs bedroom, the 2 of us with our realtor, and I described that scenario to her. I said, hey, these are all the things that are going to happen. We're going to look over the top of that building. It's okay. And we're 17 years later, and we've seen 3 other data centers, get built out there. And every time I've had that conversation with her, probably a dozen times, no, it's okay. It's gonna be okay. They're gonna build the berm. When they do that last data center, we're gonna be done looking at these other three because we're gonna look right out over the top of them. And that's not at the case of what you've proposed. The CloudHQ has now got a berm with the top 20 feet of a wall that we're going to look at. So don't come in predisposed to that because you had a 5 or 10 minute conversation at concept, point, that it overrides, 17 years of commitments and discussions. And you could see even up until the time Cloud H2 came, it was 36 feet. So they came into this eyes wide open. Just roll down through. I do appreciate the discussion about the noise that you have using the state-of-art technology, that you understand the aerodynamics of the fan systems on the coolers, and that you're making a commitment to us that you're going to meet that 50 dBA requirement. The low frequency is a big deal. So, Tad, when you're modeling, I hope that you said you're taking into account the low frequency. I hope you're talking 50 dBZ, where the dBA is weighted for the for noise, protection of workers, not environmental noise. So, I'm relying on your expertise that you're not leading us astray there. Timing of the construction berm, there's the current condition 4. I think the intent is correct that the installation of the berm and its landscaping to be completed prior to or at the same time of the building site construction. I'd like that the commission add just at the end and prior to commencing building foundation construction, because this industry is fickle, and we want to make sure as a neighborhood that this berm is built and landscaped before that building starts. And that's been discussed multiple times over the years. So add and prior to commencing building foundation construction. So I appreciate that. All right, construction impacts. I think Brett mentioned it there, 300,000 cubic yards of earthwork. That's a project, right? That's probably, they're saying that's the biggest berm they've ever built. And I recognize that. And I'm guessing it's a $10 million berm by the time they build it and landscape it. Do appreciate that. And I think the city had foresight 20 years ago when they laid this all out to incorporate it. So what it means to us as neighbors is that with an average tandem axle dump truck, that's 20,000 loads of dirt that's going to come into that site. 20,000 loads of dirt, and they're going to do it in 10 months. So that's as a contractor, that's what you want to do. You want to get after it, right? So what does that mean? That means a truck's going to enter that site every 3 minutes for 10 months during the workday. So think about that.
So Dave, is there something that you'd like addressed?
Yeah, so fugitive dust, I want to stress the importance of.
So appreciate that. And again, for the savings of time for other people here, instead of the narration of the dump trucks coming and.
No, I need to play color, Brad.
Can you get to
Rob,
your
there's people within the planning commission that don't understand that perspective, and for them to make a full and informed decision, they need to hear me.
Dave, I hear you. I'm not trying to be confrontational, but I want you to get all your concerns out so we can hear them.
Yeah, I'm probably 3/4 of the way there. If you stop cutting me off, I'll get there.
Okay, so less narration, please. I'm trying to be respectful. I want just tell us your points so we can hear them.
I'm telling you. All right. So that, fugitive dust, Kimley Horn, I want you to make sure that I assume you're going to be the construction manager. I want you to have strong language with your general contractor to make sure it's addressed. Same thing with the construction noise. When you have 20,000 dump trucks, you've got to have in your specs things like no backup alarms. Backup alarms are 95 to 110 decibels. They will kill you. And the city has been great in discussions that they're going to use their hammer. They've said that they will shut you down if there's issues with noise or dust or vibrations. So no backup alarms. Make sure that the tailgates on the trucks have padding, that they're being diligent with the truck drivers, that they're coming to a stop before they close, bring the bed down. Be careful with vibratory equipment out there, and don't use the vibrators on the dump truck beds. Don't use tracked quit dozers. If you can imagine running, every 3 minutes dumping a truck and then having a dozer backing up with steel tracks. Those things are tremendously loud. So put in your contract those types of things to make sure that they're using rubber tracked equipment. Please do that for us. Foundations. Don't use driven pile. Go with something like micropile. So think about your design relative to construction means and methods. So neighborhood relations, the things that as a neighborhood we want to have a monthly meeting with you and your general contractor at City Hall to meet with representatives of our neighborhood so that we can have a relationship through the course of construction. We request that of you. So these are my requests to you as the commissioners. So one is, don't approve this zoning amendment. This is a $1 billion investment, right? They have a capitalization rate of probably about 8%, and they're going to do $80 million of revenue a year out of that facility. And this is all driven by the availability of the power, which is tremendous. It's unbelievable they can get that power in there, but it can't be at the cost of us as the residents. And break what we think of as the neighborhood of the covenant of that zoning that includes the 36 feet. I asked that you revise the condition 4 to include prior to commencing building foundation construction, that they finish that landscape berm. Third, is to include a condition for the 50 dBz into the zoning amendment, which you can do, which protects us in the future. They're committing to us that that's possible. It's not onerous. It's not something that we're imposing on them, but to make sure that future tenants and future uses comply with the same commitment that these developers at CloudHQ are already committing to us. So put that right into the zoning amendment if you do proceed forward. The other thing is the trees. Keep the trees on the site. Put the trees on the backside of the berm. They do have value to us. Trees attenuate noise. Trees are not only there for the visual attenuation for us, but they're there for the noise attenuation. And having that additional 150-foot width of trees is valuable to us as a neighborhood. Don't go put them in West Chaska somewhere or Southwest Chaska and take away the part of the noise mitigation that those trees are intended for. Keep the trees on the site. We want as I said, we want the neighborhood monthly meeting, and Kimley Horn, you're going to make sure that you're using state-of-the-art technology. You're putting in strong specifications that not only protect us as a neighborhood, but they protect your client, because their reputation is very important to us. They want to continue to develop these things all over the world. And the last thing they want is our neighborhood documenting, a poor experience with them that, carries forward into their future development opportunities. So with that, I do appreciate your time. Rob, I'm sorry I've been controversial or confrontational with you, but this is important. This is, I'm not, a confrontational person, but this hopefully reflects to you how critical this is to me personally as well as my neighbors. So thank you for hearing me out.
Thank you. Okay. I'm going to close the public. Is there anyone else in the crowd that'd like to speak on this? I'm closing the public hearing at 9:09. For city, for staff, backup alarms, it's actually a fairly good. I do not know if it's even legal. Do not have backup alarms on large dump trucks, but
DOT requirement.
I assume it's a requirement by law and Department of
Or OSHA.
OSHA, right? So again, I don't think it's probably possible, but something to take a note of, just talk with construction or developer.
Yeah, so one of the things that we talked about with the conditional use permit that was awarded for the berm was, circulation through the site to limit the need to back up.
Right.
And I think that would be a strategy, here to go forward. The conditional use permit still stands. Those conditions are still relevant.
You can't get rid of the backup alarms, right? I mean, I assume that's gotta be, I think
I'm
we
not in a
have,
position to say
Turn off.
that.
What's that?
it's
one way
under
or the
the,
other.
I believe it's a OSHA requirement.
okay, so we'll just look into that.
No.
I think we already talked about the berm. Seems like as if it's going to be done for a panel fill out. I don't know what the difference of the foundation or not, with Dave's concern. Work with developer on that. I think that would be, just see what the timing is. Sounds like the berm might even be done before. Well before, if they're seeking out a tenant.
Yeah, I mean, that's the nature of the condition. I guess if the planning commission feels that you want to get more specific with it.
Because I mean, they did talk about that it would be done before the walls went up.
Right.
So it's like, it's more of the, definitive of
Because
a foundation or walls. So
yeah, because the
it's
berm
like-
is more of a sightline thing. I mean, I guess it does knock some noise, but it's gonna be done. So I hate to get into the dictating how their construction project goes. Same thing with like not doing piles, like that's, I think, outside of our jurisdiction of, telling them how that they can construct a building and what it may or may not need to
Well-
the geotechnical engineering that is required.
Well, we did,
Um,
but I would say, why would we have it as a condition then of, the berm is completed prior to.
Yeah, no,
or at the same time.
Yep,
as-
and that was in our concept as well.
Right.
Yep.
But that's the part where,
Right. I'm just speaking more on the terms of the construction itself, like how they construct it, whether they pile or not. Wasteful, the trees, I don't know if, again, more study, if the
Well-
sound attenuation expert thinks that it would help, then maybe some do go on that other side of the berm. But I'm outside my league here, I don't know.
I guess the question to the staff, are you looking for us recommendation wise as into which direction we want you to go on that between more trees on the lot versus the tree bank? Is that, I mean, are you looking for us to give recommendation on which direction to go?
That's always what we're looking for,
Okay.
right? So if, we're presenting our recommendation, if you feel that it should go a
Take the
different
amendment.
direction, then that's the prerogative of the planning commission to provide that input.
So I'm fine either way, but if there's no benefit for sight or sound attenuation, I'm not a sound expert. I think they should look into what benefits the site better. And then go that direction. And so if like
Then I
Dave,
say we
like,
take it out of, I would say
like
we take that piece out of.
let's see, what's
The
it say
bank, you
exactly?
mean? Or-
Yeah.
Well, because I'd be.
I know, this
hesitant
is the
to
part where it's gonna be.
Take out the
less, yeah.
bank. Because if there, let's say
I
there's
know.
no more trees are needed on the site, because it doesn't really change the sound. They'd still like to have the trees, if it was their idea to offer more trees to the city to fulfill their requirement.
Right.
So I would just want to have it be whatever helps the site better for the residents, right?
Well,
Like
sight and sound.
sight and sound.
Sight,
know.
sound and sustainability.
So if that's,
too.
if that means
Yeah.
putting more trees on the berm on the side not visible to the residents, because it cuts down sound, then great. You know, then we can do
Right.
that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. I mean, that makes sense, but
Yeah,
but it's back to the part where why would we include in the minimum landscape requirement in
Chair
the
Brass,
yeah.
proposal?
it sounds like the noise expert in the room may have
No,
input
let me see here.
relevant to that question.
That, Tad, right?
Yes, that's correct. So
What do you think, Tad?
basically with where the operational equipment is, it's not on the ground level. It's elevated up. Where it's located versus maybe the other typical data centers where they have mechanical yards on the ground. The additional trees along the berm aren't going to do anything in this case.
Don't think so.
No. No, if all the mechanical equipment, generators, coolers were ground mounted, then sure, it would be a different density of vegetation that could reduce noise further. But where it's currently set up, being the top of the berm and down,
Yeah,
actually helps because of the way that noise travels. So that, the way it's set up now is ideal versus wasting landscaping and trees on the backside.
and with the silencers and the decibel levels, again, there's statutory code here, so I don't think I'm gonna I wouldn't, I mean, can't speak on behalf of everyone here in the commission, overrule what statutory level is and put something in our, you know, our code or our preliminary approval tonight. But with the noise generated, I mean, is it even gonna get that far? I mean, are you fairly confident at the level it is? Are we?
He's saying that's gonna hit 47 decibels on.
No, I meant like it to like be heard past the berm.
Yeah, that was the whole
So
noise.
technically, it can be heard just given the fact that it's a new thing,
Right.
like it's a new building with different operations and what's out there today. But in comparison to the existing noise levels that were measured out in the field a couple of years ago, it's compatible. It's not extremely high over what was measured because we measured L50 levels that ranged within the neighborhood from, I believe it was about 40 up to 48, I think. And so on the high end, we're right about the same from an operational standpoint, and just with noise addition, it's not 48 plus 48 equals what, 96.
Right.
It's a minute add-on because noise is logarithmic. And so the perceptible change in noise is anticipated to be minimal. So
Basically from ambient noise, you'd call it that, to what it would be. Okay, and so you're of the opinion, I'm gonna trust you as the professional here, that the trees on the inside of it wouldn't help sound attenuation greatly.
it would be a very minimal.
Because if we're gonna have all these extra trees, I would like to have them for this, if it helps, great, then I'm all for putting them there. If it doesn't, then we should use them elsewhere.
Yeah, I mean, and the general rule of thumb is that in order to have a noticeable reduction in noise with vegetation, you need 100+ foot thick, vegetation in place. And with this, we're talking about kind of flat line of sight. Now we're in this, I guess in this scenario, we're talking about a berm where you've got noise being generated on the roof, basically, and the additional vegetation that would be put up on the backside of the berm is going to do nothing.
Thank you.
So, since you're stuck, so make sure that I'm hearing this right. So based on your modeling, with berm, the trees, the landscaping, the mechanicals, the silencers, that ultimately there's going to be no increase in the decibel level with the data center to the neighbors.
The predicted increase was about 2 decibels. It was just under 2 decibels, which to the human ear is deemed barely perceptible, if not at all.
So what would it take to make it so that there's no difference? So I'm.
It's all
and
manufacturer specification.
And is that even on the low frequency side of things? I mean, I
So
get
the model factored in the manufacturer, frequency data from a noise emission standpoint. So I mean, it looked at the spectral data that was provided from them and then put in our model. So it's looking at all that.
Richard Gorey, you went out to the existing data centers. I used to live next to one and I never heard anything. And so I just.
All I heard was Engler.
Yeah, right.
Well, and the reason why I'm saying this is because obviously it's a large data set.
Yeah, of course. I'm just talking about for like the crowd. I just want to reiterate, like, my personal experience, Commissioner Gorey went and visited the existing 4 centers.
And really kind of what I'm kind of recommending is the fact that we should put a stipulation saying it's like they should be held to making sure that they don't increase the decibel level to what's currently at now. No, not statutory, to what the current neighborhood is, because he's saying it's like they're right about where they're at right now.
We're off the topic from the trees. The whole thing was about the trees.
Well, it's all noise. The trees absorb noise, and he said that the trees, adding trees to the
No, I
backside
mean,
aren't
what
really
he
gonna
was
change.
saying, like, if I understand right, the place where we are adding the trees, that makes the difference. I mean, if we want to put more trees, like, the other side of the berm, that doesn't impact anything. That's what all this discussion is about, right?
Exactly.
So, I mean, if it is not impacting anything, and at the same time, as we discussed, I mean, it's about like sustainability and the space and everything we need to consider. Just not for the sake of keeping it there, we can't recommend to keep more trees over there, right? That's also we need to think about it. I mean, that's.
So
I feel
question for city real quick. The way that it's written in here, if we leave it alone, if it is determined later, even though it says it's not, that trees there would be impactful to help sound. You had the discretion at that point with the landscaping plan working with them to put some more trees there. We don't have to dictate it, right? I mean, if it winds up being helpful, you guys can work on submitting that landscape plan with more trees there. Is that correct?
I think the intent is that, Liz pointed out in her presentation, there's some areas that, staff have identified to continue to work on from a visual perspective, right? I think I'm hearing here that if there's an opportunity that the landscaping could further, assist with reduction of noise, that the preference would be that more landscaping be added to the site. I think we can work with CloudHQ to test that with the model that they've been using, right? And see if there's an opportunity there. It's sounding like that's probably unlikely. But we can, verify that, as we're working towards a final plan. And if we do see that there's an opportunity there, I think it's, I'm hearing pretty strongly that would be one that you would prefer.
Okay.
I think if that's not proven out through the modeling, that opportunity to look for other opportunities for that landscaping as an offset remains. Right? Yeah.
John?
Any further questions for city staff?
And I just wanted to add up on one comment, like,
Yes,
we were
please.
talking about like 36 feet height and all those things, right? The 36 feet building, I mean, we discussed like more than half hour about this height and all those things. I still remember that because 36 feet is allowed in the normal circumstances. Now here they are proposing another 36 more. That is the reason why we discussed more about the berm. If they just wanted to go with 36 feet, they might not even discussed about the berm and they didn't even put any effort to put the berm there. Right? They don't need it to, I guess, right? I mean, coming to that point of view, like definitely we did have a lot of discussion. I think staff has provided enough information why they wanted to. Initially, they proposed, I think, 20 feet berm, and then staff recommended them to put more, like around 25, 30 feet. That's where we had like big discussion about that. That's what I remember. I mean, it's not like just staff suggested 72 feet. Yeah, we agreed and all those things. We did discuss a lot, if I remember right. I mean, So just like 36 without a berm and 30 additional feet with a landscaping, we kind of agreed on that. Yeah. Okay, that might mitigate whatever the big building or whatever the line of sight and all those things. So definitely staff has provided enough information. I definitely say that. I mean, it's not like they just provided and we just say, okay for that, right?
Right.
Thank you. Any other commissioner discussion? Okay.
I do have, I mean, I do want to come back to the sound side of things and making sure that we do include in the amendments within the zoning side of things to make sure that the sound side of things.
What do you want to include?
And I would recommend that we put in something where we measure something right now as we create a threshold or create a baseline where the neighborhoods that are abutting that property and find the measurements and not what they were in 2022, but what they are now, and use that as the baseline and saying that when it's all
But if it's
complete.
still under the threshold, why do we need to worry about it?
Yeah,
I don't think we.
It's not our place to do that.
That's why the law isn't.
we don't do that to
Well,
industrial properties with logistics
but the
centers,
thing
with
is-
manufacturing
but the thing is,
facilities. The
those-
thing is,
those
they
were
have a
set
statutory
those were-
right to be
those were
below a
set-
certain level.
But those were set
So the
before
city-
data centers.
Doesn't matter if it's a data
you
center or
wanted
if it's
to
a
put a
I live
condition-
2 miles away from it. I drive by it all the time. I never hear it.
I mean,
Well, but you don't,
if
but that's the
want
part
to
where it's like,
put,
now put
something,
yourself,
right,
now put yourself in that in your backyard. And that's going to be now your presence every day for the next 40, 50 years.
I definitely understand, but
There
we
are
need to have
agencies that
numbers,
control
right,
that.
to put it like, I mean,
Yeah,
okay,
we're
we
not gonna
wanted to
override
have.
that.
Regulate that.
And right now, what does Minnesota have right now for that? To regulate data centers?
Well,
And
it's not just
regulate.
data center, it's sound.
It's
in general.
sound.
McDonald's, manufacturing facility, an
But now
office building.
specifically data centers.
It
And
doesn't matter what it is.
I-
though.
I-
It's
It's a
just
commercial
sound.
property.
It's just
so,
sound.
so cities that have had data centers have not had sound problems. They just talked about one.
Sure, but if
So-
there's a problem, then it gets regulated.
It's
Then
like
they
a
come
state
in.
level issue. If I say like, okay, I mean, there is industry over there that might be producing more noise and depend, I mean, it's not just like data centers. If we just compare this in data center with some real industry, right? I mean, that might be more noisy. It's all like, I don't feel like we don't have any threshold or any number to say, hey, you can't exceed 50
Yeah.
or something like that. Without having that number or that thing, we can't put any condition, right? You can't exceed more than 50 decibels or something. I don't think we are in a position to put that because we are not defining those numbers.
Yeah,
It's
when-
a, it's
There's
a
already
state,
enough
state number.
over-regulation. Why do we need to be involved in more regulation?
When the industrial buildings went in, we didn't go, well, you can't have industrial activity here and it's gotta be the same sound as it is before. Like, that's completely arbitrary. I'm not.
But when they created the PID, they said 36 feet for the
Okay.
buildings. And that was what everybody, and now they come in at 72.
It was in concept.
Well, we could put it to a vote and you can dissent from
We're
it.
gonna,
And
That's what the process works.
that is how the process
there's
works.
2 votes, right?
You know, motion.
I know, but there's 2 votes, right?
Two different
Yes,
motions.
correct.
Yep.
I'll make a motion to approve the preliminary site and building plan, preliminary plat and conditional use permit for the new substation, PC 2024-13, subject to the following 13 conditions.
Okay.
So a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Yeah.
Motion carries. Then with that, we need a motion to recommend approval of the zoning ordinance amendment to PID 7 based on the draft ordinance.
Second, I'll make a motion to
You make a
approve
motion?
it.
Second. All those in favor? Bernie,
Aye.
Awesome. Aye. Opposed?
Nah.
Motion carries. Thank you for everyone that's here.
So 2 more.
Do
on
we?
the-
Yeah, there's 2
2
more
on the
action items.
Action
Yep.
items.
I meant thank you for everyone that's here with CloudHQ. It's been 2.5 hours. I hate Anyone need a 5-minute break, bathroom, anything?
Good, thank you.
There's water. No? Okay.
That's gonna be one, yes. So that I.
Noise is noise.
Big.
It doesn't matter if it comes from a manufacturing facility or a data center.
And it could be all kinds of different. Through data centers, it's not the same. Oh, yeah.
Well, so listen, you take the negative, approach. You're a glass half empty guy. You're thinking he's on the goal, he's telling you that's not true.
What I'm saying
I'm
is.
trusting the expert that it's
What
gonna
I'm
be within the
But
decibel
what I'm
range.
saying,
We are just talking
issue to make sure.
Yeah, but that's
Because the models-
arbitrary to say like, oh, you can't have it.
But his
that passes
models are
phase
arbitrary as well
one.
too.
That's a really dangerous precedent you're setting, like that's
part?
all of it.
Which
For every development going forward.
This is like 36, but
It's not just data centers. It could be manufacturing facilities, residential neighborhoods. It
think
can't be
we're
like,
ready-
oh,
I think we're
well,
ready to go now,
this is
guys.
just eagles and hawks and people can't even live in their own backyard and have campers.
For whatever we wanted to.
Yes, but what I'm saying is, listen. look-
Yeah, we're still
Liz,
on air.
Liz, can we go to action item 7B, please?
we want the same setback.
Oh, yeah.
Same thing, right? We need to have that discretion between like where exactly we are keeping it.
You see the screen in front of you?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, wonderful.
Just can't see color.
No color?
No, TV's like dying.
Oh, really?
It's lost its color wheel.
Okay, I don't think it matters for this one.
Okay.
700.
We're gonna dive right in. We have a zoning ordinance amendment in front of us for the entity known as DBAT, that are wishing to locate in the address, known as 1230 Chaska Creek Way. This is being proposed by Chaska Industrial Owner 1 LLC. So the site in question is highlighted in blue on this aerial exhibit, and also where I'm showing my cursor if you can't see the blue, but it is an existing industrial building located just directly south of Angler Boulevard and west of Chaska Creek Boulevard in the area that was previously planned or planned for a Hy-B on the corner site here. There's an existing medical office building on the corner of Angler and Chaska Creek Boulevard, and an additional industrial building that was built with the North Industrial Building in question tonight, that's existing out there. So the building that's in front of us and what the zoning ordinance amendment is highlighting is 1230 Chaska Creek Way, which is also known as Lot 1, Block 1, Chaska Creek Center, 3rd edition. This property is in a zoning district known as PMD 20 or Planned Multi-Use District. Back in January of 2021 is when the preliminary plan and the rezoning was completed for this building and the south building to be rezoned to PMD 20. And then March of 2021 is when their final plan was approved, and both buildings have been constructed since that time. DBAT is a baseball and softball training facility. They wish to locate in this north building, 1230 Chaska Creek Way. So the request this evening is specifically a zoning ordinance amendment to PMD 20 to include baseball, softball training facility use within that zoning district. The comprehensive plan guides this overall site for business park. And as a part of the definition of business park in our comp plan, just to shorten it, it does allow for supporting retail and services within the business park district, and specifically calls out healthcare and fitness as one of those supporting services. The current zoning district permits the following for this building as office and manufacturing, warehousing facilities, not including distribution centers. So a training facility or recreational use is not specifically called out in this zoning district, and hence why they are requesting an amendment to the zoning district. To get into what the entity or use really entails and the building that they're locating in. So DBAT is a national company that specializes in baseball and softball training facilities. They do have locations in over 150 places across the country. They specialize in first-class training facilities, providing instructors, camps, and clinics for those. It is open to the public, so it's not specific to a group or a team or anything like that. So people are able to use the facilities for how they're built. The building itself is approximately 133,000 square feet total. They do the north, and we're talking about the north building here. They do have one available vacant space within this building that is approximately 24,000 square feet, which is roughly the size that DBAT typically looks for their training facilities. They would propose 18 to 21 batting cages, and these typically are uses that need that extra clearance height within the building. So that's why this building is suitable for their needs. It would employ 20 to 25 people, which entails roughly 30 stalls to accommodate both the employees and visitors to the site that they would generate. Opening hours, they would be open daily during the 10 a.m. to later hours on the weekdays and Saturdays, and then on Sundays, 12 p.m. to 6 p.m. Their peak hour times are mainly after 4 p.m. on the weekdays and between 12 and 6 on the weekends. So something that's a little bit more offset to kind of your typical office or industrial user. We did have them evaluate the parking at this location to understand if the parking requirement for this type of use could be accommodated at this building. Based on the existing users and the proposed use for recreation, it would require 302 parking stalls, 225 of which are already constructed, 77 are shown as proof parking. So the site can accommodate the parking need for this use. And I do also want to note that when they were approved for their final plan in 2021 for these buildings, this specific building and site was able to accommodate 410 stalls if needed.
Just to clarify, are they gonna build more stalls or is it already?
Nope, they can already accommodate based on the parking out there today. The 302 is based on our parking code requirement, and they've been able to evaluate that there's more than enough accommodated existing and proposed uses. The buildings are in a TIF district, tax increment finance district. There are certain limitations on how much use outside of the manufacturing, warehousing, research and development uses are allowed within a TIF district, because the purpose of a TIF district is to create large manufacturing type users that bring in a bigger portion of jobs within the city. So that's why there's that statutorial requirement in there in terms of how much outside of those uses are allowed in TIF districts. So there's a 15% limit on uses outside of qualified uses for a TIF district, which this use would be an unqualified use and would be in that 15% threshold. Based on the size that they're proposing out there and what's existing today, they're at 8% with this size of facility. So they are within the threshold of the district. So it doesn't pose a concern with the layout of the district today. So specifics to the amendment, the permitted uses for this building include office and manufacturing, warehousing facilities, not including distribution centers. The amendment would propose the following change to the permitted uses as shown in red. So there would be an add for the baseball, softball, sports training facility not to exceed more than 25,000 square feet of the building and not to include tournaments, which is mainly more of a parking piece that is not associated with this use. So we haven't had that ability to evaluate that. So that's why that specific piece is called out. So that is the specific change and amendment being proposed here to include this use. Based on our analysis of the proposed use, staff understands it to be a supportive use to the business park. It is visible to major roadways, which is pretty important for recreational type uses. It also meets the comp plan guidance for the limited amount of secondary uses within this area, and also meets the thresholds of the TIF district defined here. So in conclusion, we, as staff, believe the use proposed in its limited form, in terms of how it's stated, is reasonable. And with that, we are asking you to make a motion to recommend approval of the zoning ordinance amendment for DBAT based on the draft ordinance. And if this were to proceed this evening, it would also go to council on Monday, October 21st.
Thank you, Liz. I'll make a couple of quick comments and then for city and for just commission. So I'm very familiar with these types of uses. They're all across the Twin Cities. These are the buildings they go into, whether it's climbing walls, batting cages, gymnastics, tumbling for just all various types of fitness type uses. They go into these warehouse buildings. I think it's very appropriate. Matter of fact, I would like, going forward, maybe the city can think about when we open up districts like this, that this, rather than going through the process of a zoning amendment, it can be a conditional use. When we do some sort of industrial use going forward, this is such a common thing. See it all across the Twin Cities that a conditional use permit is typically what you have to get through the city. On this, I know that this was approved specifically with this district, and we kind of had this a lot, right? For each development, it's approved and specific use for whatever's going in there, and we kind of control it. So, in all actuality, I'd almost rather see it expanded and say that, recreational sports rather than just baseball, softball. Again, we're pigeonholing just this use for this. So let's say, they happen to have a gymnastics, on the next building. Next year, we're doing this again, where they could have just did, maybe it's a conditional use permit. So that's just my thought out loud there for the city. Yeah, I think it's kind of the same thing.
That particular location's been empty for quite a while, though, part of it, right?
Well, the building is
It's
full of-
been there 2 years? Has that building been there almost 2 years?
Probably-ish.
Yeah, probably. They're down to this one vacancy, it looks like.
Hey, Liz, do you know of the other tenants in the building or even in that complex? What are the employee counts and average wages?
I don't know that offhand.
Sorry, say, Commissioner.
Employee counts and average wages. Basically trying to get to the point of what are we giving up for allowing this special use? Because the other alternative is to not allow this and actually put in what the intended use was for that space. And to me, that's the part where knowing what is actually in the space and what it actually brought in would be good to know. And
The space is
That's
vacant.
probably something the
well, not that
applicant
space, but the other four.
answer. I was trying to see if the table that we put together had those values, but
I'll let the applicant
Yeah.
speak, but I'll just say from my personal experience, generally speaking, these uses are heavily more employed than you had 20,000 square foot warehouse user with you're picking and packing, maybe you have 4 or 5 employees. something like this, you're gonna have a lot more, so it's probably more jobs. But
This
I'll let the
would-
applicant-
They
let the
put
app-
20?
This has 20 at 18.
20 to 25
Yeah.
employees.
Okay.
And there might be other specialty people that they bring in or instructors beyond that.
Okay.
But 20 to 25 is what they've said.
So it's public hearing. I'll open it up at 9:44. If the applicant would like to step forward.
Good evening, everyone. Matt Crew. I live at 7201 61st Street in Cottage Grove. I'm the owner of DBAT in Lake Elmo, so another one of these on the other side of town. Yeah, so I'll just reiterate a couple of things that were already said. So we are not affiliated with the club, not affiliated with any associations. You know, we're open to the public. We have kids that come in, they're 5 years old, all the way up to 80-year-olds. Literally, we have people that are guys that are soft pitch or slow pitch softball players that come in. They're literally 80 years old. They do the pitching machines. They do slow pitch as well. So any of you guys think that you maybe missed your mark in the major leagues or fast pitch circuit, you know, we can maybe get you there. We don't guarantee that, but we do train all ages, mostly 5-year-olds to 14-year-olds. As far as the question, I think in terms of jobs, so yeah, typically 20 to 25. A lot of those are independent contractors, so they're coming in, they're doing instructions for us. So we have in Lake Elmo anyone from a couple of people that played in the major leagues for years down to like D3 former college players that are giving instructions. Pay rates anywhere from $25 an hour up to $50 an hour. And then we have general managers, assistant general managers, a couple owners. Myself and my wife are the owners. So pretty good paying jobs. You know, I think the more you do lessons, the more you make in terms of income. So yeah, I can answer any other questions, but it's a fun business. It's one that I'm proud of. I'm proud to be a part of. It's fun. We hear a lot of stories about kids that come in and last year they didn't hit the ball at all. And this year they're like line drives. So it's a lot of fun. And I think we'd be a really powerful benefit to your community. So
this isn't a type of facility that, you know, a local organization would come in and rent
they could.
space. Could they?
They could, yep.
Okay.
Yeah, that happens a lot over on the other side of town. Yep. So yeah, local teams will do it, club teams will do it. It's individual based as well. So we do lots of private lessons. We have membership programs that give you discounts on private lessons and cage rentals. We have a really large pro shop sponsored by Rollins in Easton. So that's one of our revenue streams as well. So yeah, it's memberships, camps and clinics, private lessons, cage rentals. You don't have to be a member. You can come in and just purchase credits for a swing card and then the pro shop. So there's 6 revenue streams that kind of work together to create a pretty successful business.
The jobs aren't necessarily local. They're more of the contractors. So like you mentioned,
yeah, there's probably going to be about 15 that are independent contractors, probably 5 to 7 that are full-time, you know, front desk workers, management team, you know, marketing people. So, yeah. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Any concern about balls constantly getting hit?
I mean,
Or
it does.
noise? I mean,
Well,
I
it
don't know
doesn't.
who the neighbors are, but I'm assuming that can be solved.
Yeah, I mean, so again, that's between the landlord and their tenants.
Right.
Inside the building.
I have them in my buildings.
Mhm.
Not just this, again, some climbing walls, jumping facilities,
those
you know,
don't make much
karate,
noise though.
baseball.
You got like pitch to pitch
pitch
is
to
up
pitch, yep.
in the industrial warehouse
Right.
next to businesses too.
Yep, nope, it's very common.
Yeah.
Extremely common. So common that I think the city should think about
Well.
this being a conditional use permit. I really do. I mean,
But at the same time as this building, I mean, they were built for a special purpose and the
course.
purpose was for office and warehouse space.
Right,
And
yep.
to create jobs in those areas. And I think that's the part where we can't lose sight of why the buildings were built and why we put the structure in place.
Yep, so all the buildings in the Twin Cities were built for that, like warehouse, office, distribution, manufacturing, and yet they, you know, over time, we find these tenants going in those buildings. It's just a retrofit. It's the same as like, same idea as like, like office buildings in downtown Minneapolis, they're going to be retrofitted into apartments.
Apartments, yep.
You know what I mean? Like we're not,
Yeah.
we're
That's
losing
because
sight
that
of.
was the end of the life cycle.
Well, this is the
This
end
is
of
the beginning of the life cycle
Yeah.
of that building.
But
It's
this
2
is
years
where-
old.
This is where they go.
So
I think it's.
you hear where I'm
The
going,
use
so.
case is changing basically rapidly, right? I mean, we used to have big box stores. Now it's not, they're not building big. So it's again changing day by day. So it's not uncommon, like.
Dust is barely settled on the construction of this building. So I guess that's the part where it's.
Liz, can
too
you
soon.
speak again real quick to the purpose of how this was set up? And there's certain requirements that have been met, right? If this goes in.
Yeah, it's a couple things, and how we're looking at this. There's the comprehensive plan guidance, for business parks, which lists out a layer of, uses within that, and supportive uses that are defined in there do include healthcare and fitness as a part of that, as long as it has that threshold as well. And then the TIF district is the piece that limits the, types of qualified and unqualified uses within that TIF district. So there's another layer effect out there on these buildings.
Right?
Right, the 15% is the maximum unqualified uses.
Qualified, right?
Yep.
Okay. This would bring us to 8.
Correct.
For
Yep.
this building, or is it?
Yep.
For the whole
For the whole, yep.
Sure.
So
Which the district is this development.
The 2 buildings.
the 2 industrial
They got
buildings.
7% they can use on the other building.
Yep.
Yep. Chair Brass, we still have the public hearing open too. It looks like there may be another person who's wanting to speak.
Sure.
Roach.
Yeah, Joe Jutland, with Forte Real Estate Partners. I live at 550 Bighorn Drive in Chanhassen, Minnesota. I just want to speak to a couple of the questions that have come up. First regarding the sound. So of the DBAT's 150 locations across the country, sound has been something that has always people bring up as a concern. But of those locations, they've never had to add any additional sound attenuation, sound remediation. So precedent's been there. If sound remediation needed to go in, it could be done, but they have not had to do it up to this point. Regarding the jobs that would be created, I don't have the specific numbers, but in terms of the amount of jobs per square foot, we were above the threshold. The price, the employee rate was above the threshold that was required with the district. So I just want to touch on some of those things. So.
Thank you.
And that was what? On the TIF?
15%.
No, the wage, right? You mentioned something about.
I think it was employees per square.
Jobs per square.
Jobs per square foot.
Yeah, and I'm not as familiar with that piece of it, but
Maybe this guy is.
Hello, if I could speak, Jay Moore, Operative Investment Company. I'm the original developer of this project. I represent the ownership of Chaska Industrial owner, Building 1, LLC. So we're here tonight because we developed these 2 buildings. We have 5 really good, solid tenants that are in these buildings, and we're very proud of what the end result is. If any of you have been to those businesses and seen how much money has been invested, both on the outside, the landscape, the inside, the buildings, and more importantly, the office finish, especially with Imris. They're a neurological MRI company, which I hope everyone in Chaska is very proud to have that. And we're very proud to put them there. And so one of the criteria for us to move forward with this $45 million investment was to have a TIF district created. It helped create some of the funding for the infrastructure. So that TIF district represented, the requirement was 20 jobs and a wage requirement of $17.50 an hour, which we've greatly exceeded. And so we're sitting here with a vacancy in this building with a complementary use that's not going to be during business hours, but will be a benefit to the community. So as ownership, we were very protective of the TIF district. As Liz has outlined, and I've met with Julie at the city many times on this, we would not be here if it was going to jeopardize the TIF district and the wages and the jobs that were created. So it fits into that 8%. So we're okay with just this one use. So we won't be here next month with a pickleball court or something like that. Which you probably will get those requirements in the future, but anyway, I just wanted to address that on the jobs and the wages.
So then you probably have the knowledge in comparison to the other tenants then, as into the rates that the other tenants have and employee counts. How's that?
So does Julie at the city.
Okay.
We've met the requirement.
No, I'm saying the other, in comparison,
Not sure I'm following you.
the other tenants in the spaces.
Yep.
So understanding how this space compares to the other spaces that are actually occupied. I'm just, I'm trying to understand.
Use.
Hmm?
I mean, they outlined the wages for these independent contractors, which is, it exceeds the TIF amount that's required in the development. But this is outside of the TIF. It's the 8% or less than the 15%. So
Okay.
I can't comment on that. Yep.
Chair Brash and Commissioners, since there's been a lot of discussion going on around the TIF district, I just want to clarify for your understanding. Administration of the TIF district, oversight of the TIF district, approval of the TIF district are all a function of the Chaska EDA board. So that's not something necessary. I mean, I think it's relevant information. It's helpful information for this discussion, but ensuring compliance with it is not necessarily a responsibility of the Planning Commission.
Right.
Just want to make sure that's understood.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions for city staff or anybody else want to come up before I close the public hearing? Okay, at 9:55, I'll be closing the public hearing. Any further questions? For anybody? Nobody wants? No? All right, so with that, I'll make a motion to recommend to city council approval of the zoning ordinance amendment to the planned multi-use district PMD 20 to include a baseball, softball, sports facility use within the 1230 Chaska Creek Way building, subject to the following two conditions. Is there a second?
Second.
Herbert, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Oppose?
Yep.
Motion carries. Thank you, guys. Liz, can you jump right into 7C, please?
Ashley's gonna take over the
Ashley.
third and final.
Ashley?
Yes, it'll be me. And just need 1 second here and I will make my presentation brief for you this evening. How about that?
The remaining applicant, appreciate your patience. Thank you for sticking it out.
Okay, before you this evening is a concept plan by the Goddard School for a licensed daycare facility.
There we go. That's better.
And I've never been told that I talk quiet in my life, so it's always such a pleasure when I speak into this microphone and get told that. At 1580 White Oak Drive, the site is generally located in the southwestern corner of White Oak Drive intersection with Engler Boulevard, so west of Highway 41 and also east of the city's fire station property. As you know, Chaska has a 3-step review process. Tonight we are in the concept plan review, so that first phase. So our plans are generally high level, which also means that our review is equally high level. So we're here this evening generally presenting some of the issues that were identified as part of this process that will be addressed in those later steps within the process. The 2.5 acre site was part of the North Meadows 8th edition plat, originally approved in the early 90s. Shortly after that, the site and building plans were approved for a new medical office building. It was anticipated at that time that it would occur in 2 phases. That first phase, so that northern section, was built shortly after approval of that plat. It included also 70 parking stalls in a configuration that wrapped around 3 sides of that 12,000 square foot building. Currently, there are 3 tenants within that, or excuse me, 4 tenants within that building, 3 of which are generally medical office type uses, and the third is a pretty fast casual restaurant use. There's also an existing sidewalk that runs along the east side of that existing building, so on the west side of White Oak Drive, and it terminates just north of the site access. Phase 2, as you can see here from the existing conditions, was never constructed, and so that portion of the site is currently vacant. So this evening, the concept plan contemplates construction of a new daycare building on that southern section. The daycare would be licensed for up to 159 children. It's anticipated to have about 35 staff at full capacity and operate Monday through Friday from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. Access to that site would be shared via that existing site access as currently proposed. And grading, or the site would be regraded for the new building. The 2 play areas, which are shown here in pink, and then also the new parking areas shown in yellow on the screen before you. In addition to those site gradings, there are 2 retaining walls that are proposed to tie into the surrounding grades, essentially to create those flattened areas for the parking and the play areas. That northern wall would be roughly 5 to 7 feet at its tallest point, and that western wall roughly 4 to 5 feet tall at its highest point. The concept plan related to the site also does include a sidewalk to close the pedestrian gap from where it terminates along White Oak Drive, as well as on Meadow Lane where it terminates west of the property. So now I'm going to just walk us through the details of the concept plan and staff's analysis as it relates to that, and I'll try to do it as briefly as possible. First, looking at the daycare use itself, the comp plan guides the property for commercial. The property is zoned PCD 5, so planned commercial district. Daycare uses are generally consistent with that guidance and zoning. The new building would be just over 2 stories in height, would be roughly 13,000 square feet in total size with a footprint of half of that, so it's 6,500 square feet. A code-defined building height of 31 feet. The first floor generally contains the lobby, staff offices, as well as some of those younger rooms for infants and toddlers. And then that second story is more of the preschool age classrooms, as well as a multi-purpose room. And access to that second story is via stairwells that kind of flank the outsides of the building and a centrally located elevator. The 2-story building's facade would be comprised of high-quality materials that are consistent with what our code would require. So hardy board, stone, and glass, and metalin would be used as accents on that entrance awning. That building height of 31 feet is generally consistent with what was shown in 1990 for building heights, because the second phase was anticipated to be the taller of those 2 phases. The applicant has indicated that they intend to subdivide the property to put that new daycare onto a newly created lot. As currently shown, there would be the need for either a zoning amendment or a variance for that existing building to the interior lot line. Staff has identified that there is an opportunity to eliminate that by adjusting the lot line. So we do plan to continue to work with the applicant to resolve that issue ahead of the next phase. Walking through site plan details. City utilities are readily available for connection. There are existing storm utilities as well as sanitary sewer utilities that do encumber the southwest corner of the site. So staff will continue to work with the applicant as we work into the next phase to ensure that we've secured the proper easements for that public infrastructure, as well as the private improvements would not impede or prohibit or prevent, future maintenance and replacement opportunities for the city. The plan also indicates that the intent is to use underground facilities to treat for stormwater. The next phase would include the details of that plan, so you'll see that should the project move forward. The plan does trigger the city's landscaping ordinance. Preliminary review of the plan indicates that there's an adequate mix of trees, shrubs, and perennials to screen the new site improvements, and is included in your staff report for this evening. More detailed and thorough review would occur ahead of the next phase. As I previously mentioned and is noted in your report, this sidewalk connection would close that pedestrian gap that exists here at this intersection. As staff has reviewed the plan, we've identified 2 potential additional opportunities to improve site circulation as it relates to pedestrians through the site. The first would just be in looking for alternatives to improve pedestrian comfort on the front of the building by providing some sort of separation. So currently there's building a 7 to 8 foot sidewalk, and then the parking area that's just separated by a row of bollards. So perhaps there's an alternative there to create some pedestrian relief coming in and out of that building. And then the second, probably the more important of the 2, would be to provide a sidewalk connection heading south from to allow direct access from that external pedestrian network into the site. So again, staff will continue to work with the applicant on those issues ahead of the next phase. As it relates to parking, parking lot setbacks as shown are appropriate. Number of stalls exceed what would be required by code. Those parking calculations and graphs are included in your report for this evening. Acknowledging that the trip generation for daycares is much different than the original anticipated use for this site. Staff reviewed ITE trip generation data. That calculation is included in the table for your report this evening. But to summarize that data, the site would generate roughly 100 more average daily trips throughout the day than what was originally anticipated in the 90s. The county has advised that after reviewing the plans and that ITE trip data, that the upcoming roundabout project north of here, so at White Oak and Engler, that new roundabout would adequately accommodate that increased trip generation, so they don't have any additional concerns and would not need to do any additional intersection analysis. So staff generally agrees with that. However, just given the trip generation, as noted in your report this evening, staff is asking the applicant to explore an opportunity to provide a secondary southern access onto Meadow Lane, like was originally anticipated in the 90s. And so you'll see that analysis and that review in the next phase. So just briefly wrapping up here this evening, the applicant did hold a neighborhood meeting at the beginning of August. There were 7 residents that attended that. They generally asked questions about the daycare's operation, the plans, specific questions about place ground screening, and then asked general questions just about construction timeline, both on the county's project as well as the daycare construction project. So with that, I'll conclude this evening and look for a motion, but I will answer any questions if you have them first.
Ashley, Lee's first commission questions for the city staff.
First of all, I like the idea of putting sidewalks on both White Oak and Meadow.
Yeah.
Because there currently isn't sidewalks right there.
Mhm.
People are walking out on the road going to Holiday.
Mhm.
And
Well, yeah, the sidewalk just stops.
it just
Right.
does stop. And if they put that, the roundabout there at Engler and White Oak,
It'll help.
to create a backlog of traffic. So I think having 2 entrance ways into that property is a really good idea.
Yeah, the egress.
Yeah,
My
don't
fear is
know.
like people going through the neighborhood.
Yeah,
to get
that's-
to the.
Yeah, that's.
You don't want that.
No, that's the hard part as well too, is.
Good thing it's not that far that they're gonna be traveling. If they're coming off of Victoria
There was a conversation here too of, I had the same concerns of, put it on there, you're gonna have traffic. The only benefit I could see is if someone's coming into the site, if you're getting like, let's say it's a daycare, right? You're dropping off children and they got a bunch of people coming in, then instead of coming back out the same way someone's coming in, they could
Right.
potentially loop out, right?
Correct.
So it's like it.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
Kind of like the schools do.
Correct.
Right,
So to
forces you to loop
alleviate,
out.
Yeah.
you know,
Entryway and exit way.
to do that, but people I think might naturally, that would be the only way, like, for my mind, in favor of the second access. Otherwise, I do think it could cause a little weird congestion, like it's one too many, but at the same time, in the morning and peak times when you're dropping off children and picking them up, you could come out that way, and then you can back at that little potential snake point where you're sharing with the next building. So, you know, is there a rendering of this potential southern access or not yet? At this concept
I
level?
think they asked them to do it, but not yet.
Yeah,
Chair, the concept from 1990
Sure.
showed that secondary access
Yeah.
along the western property line. But
Horse and buggy.
yeah.
Sorry.
is that drawn by hand back then too? That's back when they wrote letters
Yeah.
with like pens on paper.
Oh, computer.
I'm curious to see what the surrounding neighbors.
Yeah, and again, it's not, it's,
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll
there's a
get,
few people out here. It's
Right.
not a public hearing, but people can come up and talk certainly,
Mhm.
before I just wanna roundtable this.
I do have is there concern about the traffic congestion right there coming off of? Because I took my kids step by step, so I know that
Oh, so me too.
area very well. So I could only imagine now you've got people diverting right there, slowing down, and people still continuing on into the area.
Mhm.
That's, not a big concern, but just wondering what kind of issues may happen there. Because I know that there's enough width, but is there something the city can do to make sure that there's adequate space to be able to make sure that people can get in and out off of White Oak into that?
because there's a lot of different entrances. on
Yeah,
White
so
Oak, And
that-
it can get very,
And it's right
Tight.
there next to the roundabout.
correct.
I feel like
So,
most people are coming from the only benefit, the only good thing is it's a right in. And that's where I think with that extra access point, if they could egress out on Meadow, would help a lot. That's where I do see where the city's coming from.
Yeah.
Because
right,
if they have it like,
there's some, yeah,
a quick right in is easy for cars to make the right in and get into the lot, so
Mhm.
that's great.
right.
But coming
Separate
back
them out.
out and to
Mhm.
take a left across traffic
Too many.
is,
Right.
that's where I could see the extra egress helping.
Right.
And-
I would agree with that one. as
And
well.
so then they could come on the main intersection and wait.
But then it's just a matter of how can they make that work within their
There's gonna be
plan.
there's gonna be a peak time definitely at like 7 to
Oh, yeah.
6:30 to 8:30 or something. but-
Absolutely. And then again in the evening.
Yeah,
Mhm.
so
But-
there will be
Yeah.
peak times.
There's opportunities. That'd be good. to
Is there
see.
any questions for staff before I'm gonna let people come up? If anybody wants to come up, I'll see some people here. So there's no going once.
Yeah,
Come
the
on.
applicant is here.
What was that?
Applicant.
Yep. In general, I would like to say, I mean, I have kids that went to step by step. I think this is a benefit to the community. I appreciate more
Great
daycare,
reputation.
you know.
Yes.
Over the applicants.
Yeah.
So,
Anthony and Laura Miller, 5026?
yes.
5026 Boulder Lane in Chaska. We are Chaska residents. Love the community. I've lived here since 2020. And obviously would love to bring a premier daycare facility to the area.
Our partners couldn't make it tonight,
Yeah.
which is Anthony's aunt and uncle, and they have owned Goddard's for the past 15 years. And we have our partner, our other team with us, Goddard, and our engineer and our construction, so they can help answer any questions too.
Maybe some about the driving
Yeah.
traffic, I don't know.
There is a right out of, on White Oak to 41.
Most traffic doesn't go that way though.
Yeah.
Yeah, correct.
Chaska for 20.
Well, we took a lot of the considerations, from the neighborhood meeting too, the exterior of the building. There was concern about, driving on that road. What was it? Meadow Lane, yeah. So that's why we didn't want to put any kind of access on that side to kind of leave that as a residential street. But I also understand the concern with, the one way in, one way out. But I do know in Medina location, there is that one way in, one way out too, and it works. So
Yeah, and that's we bring our 2-year-old daughter to the Goddard in Medina that my aunt and uncle own. And from experience, the one way in, one way out, although it is not ideal, it works. And they only have parking on the front side of the building. We have parking on both sides, both sides, meaning facing the street and facing the building. Plus we have a little nook. What was that called? Hammerhead turnaround. For cars to use, bigger SUVs, that kind of thing. So, but thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Say we have an engineer here. Engineer in terms of
Civil. Yes.
Okay.
So Sherry Aaron's with Westwood Professional Services at, everybody forgot where they're from. I don't remember the number. I think it's 1, 2.
What was your name again?
Sherry Aaron's.
Sherry, okay.
Our office is in Minnetonka on Whitewater Drive. I just can't remember the number.
Opus Business Park?
Pardon? Yes.
Yeah. So, have you considered that with the city's, potential request of a second access point and what's your view?
We did look at that. Operationally, it works best to have the building front facing White Oak Drive, and not have the playground, because if you have to get the drive on the other side, you're gonna have to totally flip the building. And that would put the parking against the residential neighbors right there. And also then we put the playground.
Playground on the back, so.
Yeah, you'd have to basically flip the building. So the playground would be against that really busy White Oak Drive. So the preference was to have the front of the building facing, White Oak Drive as your storefront there. And that sets the playground to the backside, away from the traffic.
And it's probably, I can just tell it coming off that parking lot to have an access, that'd be too quick too close to the intersection.
Yes, where it's at, the city would not allow that. It would be, we need to have at least 400 feet from the intersection.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah, no, I agree with that. Flipping the building and moving the playground. I don't want the playgrounds on the busy road anyway, even though it's secured and fenced, but I like them tucked behind the building.
And keep it away from the public service building as well too.
Well,
yeah. Okay.
Tight confines.
It just is. I brought my kid to Step by Step for years, and it's the same thing, right? You share one holiday and Step by Step. I made it work. It's not ideal, but it's it's
right
from like 8:30 to 3:30. Yeah, step, and then there's a little peak time there.
Because we have another one, kitty corner. Right? So,
Yeah.
so then we have,
Yeah.
drop off and pick up at the exact same time for 2 locations that are kitty corner.
Yeah. And I'm willing to bet I'm sure that this will be full. Like, this is a needed service. I'm
Well,
sure.
for sure. I'm not saying there's not a need for it.
No, yeah, I agree. Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah, it's a daycare.
It's
holidays. Yeah.
Okay. I don't, any questions for, I have Sherry? Any more further questions for Sherry? No, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Twisted around in my mind.
Yeah, I wish there was a way you could doesn't work real well if you put the other access. What's the city thinking? Where were you thinking the access would go? What's your thought?
Well, I think first and foremost, this is an issue that won't be solved this evening. But I think, you know, we've got a condition in the concept approval to study the access.
Yeah, right.
And I think that's what we need to do, right? So I don't think staff has a recommendation for a solution this evening. I think what we're saying is that as it moves forward into that preliminary, this is something that should be studied to figure out what is going to be that best configuration. It may come back that, you know, given the spacing and everything, you know, it is that one that exists. But maybe there's a way to get a secondary access. I don't know. Maybe there's something else that we're not thinking of right now. But you know, I think we're in line with the concerns that you're expressing. We also recognize that, you know, there will be a roundabout there, and so the plans will need to reflect that configuration. And some of that build out as well is going to change the access location, I think, for the bank, if I remember right. So that will realign where that access exists as part of that project compared to the existing access on the side of the street that we're talking about.
Yeah, that makes more sense.
So that'll change some things. So all of that needs to be tossed in the bag and understood and analyzed. And I think we'll be having an eye towards, you know, that best outcome solution, you know, for everyone involved.
Right. Thank you. Thoughts? Any further thoughts? I mean, in concept, I think if it's going to be for any city, sounds like it's baked in the cake to review the access more.
That's really kind of the big.
Yeah, that's the big one, right? Otherwise, everything else I think looks fine. Any other concerns from anybody?
Did the neighbors have any concerns, or what was the biggest comment from neighborhood meeting?
They were glad it wasn't a Taco Bell.
And they had more to say in the fire department.
Yeah.
All the noise going on there.
That's why I was curious what the neighbors were saying.
Project, yeah. Okay.
Okay.
I guess that's everything then. So with that. The verbiage. All right, make a motion to recommend approval of the concept plan for Goddard School subject to the following 6 conditions.
Second.
Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Right off of, I think it's Victoria.
Okay.
Right there.
We will receive in the other meeting minutes. If we're going to do those for the packet, they are received.
So these are all the new DR work.
That would be both the
Versus
city council meeting minutes and
14 years ago.
Then with that, someone make a motion to adjourn. So move. First.
Second.
Last one, I'll get to Boswell.
Seventh.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Adjourn.